Department of Agriculture, taxpayer money, as their personal piggy bank. And you got these white farmers and Senator Tim Scott whining and complaining because finally we're trying to rectify the problem.
Dispense supplements in office or virtually on one platform. First, choose from more than 300 practitioner-grade supplements.
Oh, and I think Senator Tim Scott, in his mind, he thinks that he's actually sane and normal. Obviously, he's been drinking his own Kool-Aid for too long that he doesn't realize what he is saying, how it actually affects people, because he's doing a bit too much in order to satisfy his GOP, in order to move forward, to continue getting the votes and being the person that he is. For me, I'm just embarrassed. I am insulted by his comments, and, you know, it's just ignorant.
Michael, Hotel, your thoughts?
Yes. Well, brother, you know, I've been talking about this, man, for a few months now. And, you know, on my show, I shared the May 2nd interview that Tim Scott did on Face the Nation. This ties, I cannot stress this enough, Roland, this ties directly into the GOP rebuttal speech that Tim Scott gave Wednesday, April 28th. Because in that speech, right after he said America's not a racist country, the next thing he said was, it's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination. And the $5 billion that he attacked on Face the Nation, this is how Republicans think. This ain't just Tim Scott. I understand you playing that segment. You have to understand, this is how Republicans think. Senator Lindsey Graham has been attacking the $5 billion, calling it racist and calling it reparations. He was on Fox News attacking this. So I'm glad you did the interview with Secretary Vilsack. I'm glad also they're going to focus in on heirs property, because I've been studying the ways that African American farmers have lost their land, 12 million acres of land over the past 100 years, and heirs property is one of the ways that was used to steal our land, as well as over assessing the tax liabilities on these lands as well, brother. So this is an example of how elections have consequences. I can't stress this enough. And lastly, Roland, not a traitorous Republican in the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate voted for this $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that has the $5 billion in it going to farmers of color, including African American farmers.
And you know, it's very interesting, Brittany. You know, I've had to deal with all of these nincompoos on social media. Asians got a bill, the Asians got a bill. We ain't got no bill. $5 billion. Wasn't $5 billion in that COVID bill an anti-hate bill? And first of all, it wasn't the Asian bill.
Right.
Okay? Any fool who could read the bill would know it wasn't the Asian bill. Was it as a result of people raising the issue on Asian hate crime attacks? Yes. But the bill is not Asian specific. But it's amazing, I've listened to a lot of fools. Biden ain't done nothing, the Democrats ain't done nothing, the CDC ain't done nothing. Well, how in the hell the $5 billion got in the bill?
I've been a type 1 diabetic for 6 years. I was diagnosed when I was 52. I've been using Omnipod for 3 years.
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 5 years ago, later in life.
Diagnosed when I was 2. I've been on Omnipod for about a year and a half now, and before I was on Omnipod, like, no matter what I did, my blood sugars were all over the place. My A1C stayed between 8 and 12.
Before Omnipod, I was taking 4 injections of insulin a day.
I was doing, 8 to 10 shots a day.
And then before every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I would estimate the amount of carbohydrates in the meal. Before I ate it, I would take the injection. I would hope I got it right.
This whole school algebra, equation to figure out, okay, my blood sugar is this. I'm going to keep this in carbs. So X equals the amount of insulin I have to do.
Checking or guessing about how much insulin I should give myself.
If I go into a meeting and there is some food on the table, in the past, I would just sort of look at that and go, well, that's not for me. I'm only going to take 3 injections today, and this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
so whenever I found out about the Omnipod, I was all for it. I was all in. I was like, I have got to get this no matter what.
Yeah, Roland, I mean, it's really just silly. And quite frankly, if anyone is actually taking a look at these bills, they know that they're useful to all of us across the board, right? And I think one of the things that's been, I've actually been rather impressed when it comes to Biden and the Democrats is we have seen them move left. And do things particularly that would support our community as Black folks time and time again. I mean, even when we're talking about his plans to attack major corporations, that has to do directly with us. He is doing the necessary work, and quite frankly, I think that bill was an important piece of legislation.
You know, but it's just it's as if nothing actually happened with the Black farmers, Michael. It's as if, I mean, I'm just trying to understand. All the folks who holler reparations, what the hell is that?
Well, you know, brother, it's you can't make sense out of nonsense. First of all right, I would encourage people to go to whitehouse.gov and actually read the 45 plus executive orders. See, people don't want to read. That's part of the problem. Go to whitehouse.gov. Every executive order that the president signs is at whitehouse.gov. You can read it for yourself. A lot of these executive orders impact African Americans. He did one January 26th. I talked about this yesterday on my show that deals with redlining. Okay? And redlining historically has locked African Americans out of wealth creation. When you deal with reparations, you just had the hearing and you covered it on your show. I did it on mine, Tulsa Race Massacre. But what people have to understand is if you don't get 60 votes in the Senate, which means 10 Republicans need to vote for it if Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema vote for reparations, which they're not going to do. If you don't get 10 votes in the Senate, H.R. 40 or any reparations bill is not going anywhere. So a lot of, if you look at the American Rescue Plan, if you look at the infrastructure bill, if you look at the American Families Plan, all these policies impact African Americans. The American Rescue Plan, the tax credits for children, is going to cut child poverty in half. Do you know any black children? This is going to see, this is stupid ass nonsense. Okay? All you got to do is read. Proper documentation ends all conversation. If you and the COVID-19 hate crime bill, it's not called an Asian hate crime bill. The actual name of it is the COVID-19 hate crime bill. You can read all bills at Congress.gov. You can read all bills at Congress. I was reading the text of the bill yesterday. If you actually read the bill, it applies to COVID-related hate crimes against everybody, not just Asian Americans. Yes, it was spurred by a 150% increase in hate crimes reported by Asian Americans, but it's not specific to Asian Americans. Now, what they should do is go ahead and push this anti-lynching bill again that they tried to push in with the Rand Paul Republican. They should push that again now, and then expose the Republicans for their hypocrisy when they vote against it. I'm all for the anti-lynching bill, but the COVID-19 hate crimes bill, what it's actually called, go to Congress.gov, read it, is not specific to Asian Americans. People just want to complain about BS, and they don't read. This is part of the problem.
If you want to see stupidity, here is sheer stupidity. Tanya Smith on YouTube. Taniya Smith. You stupid. This is literally what she tweeted, Bernardo. Roland, what the hell is $5 billion?
What?
Square Terminal is an all-in-one credit card machine. It's built from the ground up entirely by Square. Terminal takes...
This dumbass, she literally tweeted, Roland, what the hell is $5 billion? Biden hasn't done nothing for blacks. I ain't say $5. I ain't say 5,000, 500,000, 5 million. We talking $5 billion. This dumbass, Tanya Smith, $5 billion ain't nothing. Tanya, tell that to a black farmer who's behind on their loan. Tell that to a black farmer who got screwed with Trump's tariff war, who's been out there struggling. And you sitting your dumb ass on YouTube talking about $5 billion ain't nothing. The black farmers have been fighting for this money. And then when it got approved, they got sued, and you sitting your ignorant ass on here talking about $5 billion ain't nothing. What are going on here?
It's so upsetting. You know, one thing is like, I'm from the Dominican Republic. I'm from the island. So one thing is that when my family immigrated from here, immigrated to the U.S., is that in the country, the way that we survive is by the farm, by growing our own food, growing our own produce. So the farmers, this has such a huge impact. Do you know $5 billion, how many families it would affect? I mean, it will go down generations, this amount of money, that it's about time that these farmers got. We've been talking about this for years. Look at the huge decline of how much farmers are now in existence. So it's about time that it finally came here. So Tanya, let's not even give us some time of day. Move on, Roland.
Well, and again, there's a reason why the three banking institutions who we talked about are trying to fight it, because they mad the loans are going to get paid off early. No. Y'all need to understand, we ain't playing games here. We know the okie doke. And so at some point, we need to stop dealing with just stuck on stupid people who, folk like Tanya, they gonna whine about everything. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they put $20 billion in for that impacted black people, and she probably say, 20 billion ain't nothing. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And I'm telling you, folks, it's a lot of people who know nothing about stimulus. Nothing. And then I had one dude who was sitting there going, well, I don't understand why, we sitting here, they putting this in and they ain't done this, they ain't done that. And why we gotta push them to pass stuff? I'm like, you do know that's what people do every single day. And then I had one person go get mad at me saying, well, I don't understand why they couldn't put the John Lewis bill and put it in together with the COVID anti-Asian bill and pass both at the same time. And I'm like, so you pay no attention to the fact that Republicans do not want to pass a voter bill? This is easy, y'all. The so-called anti-Asian hate crime bill got 94 votes. That's why it passed. You need 60 votes. I rolled my uncle's video in just one moment.
Racial injustice is a scourge on this nation, and the black community has felt it for generations. We have an obligation to do something about it. Whether it's canceling student debt, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in black-owned businesses, the black community deserves so much better. I'm Nina Turner, and I'm running for Congress to do something about it.
The App Marketplace Developer Program is focused on helping.
Open the car first.
Yes.
Making me nervous.
Whoever put a capital P is good.
That's me. That's me. Yes, read it out loud.
Read it out loud. Try. Read it out loud. You make me cry. Open.
Let's wrap that in super.
Just put the knighting to face.
Still wrong.
Open the biggest ones first.
God, that.
Hello, hello.
While other schools may offer welding classes, at Tulsa Welding School, we are welding. Since 1949, a drunken night with friends turned tragic.
Oh, there's a knife right here. And I grabbed it, and it went like this.
A man is dead. Was it self-defense?
I couldn't breathe, and I felt like I was scared.
Or did a social media post show something more sinister?
Those thoughts were in her head for weeks before.
We jury fixed the defendant's sentence to state penitentiary for return.
Did the punishment fit the crime?
That's what they call justice. I don't know.
Everybody loved Houston Johnson.
Houston was very charismatic.
He, lived life to the fullest.
Like the life of the party, but that was Houston.
On a summer home from college, Andy Pasa met and fell in love with Houston.
We had a very fun relationship. I always felt really secure with him.
They had a son, Kyle. 8 months later, they split but remained close.
Houston and I ended up being best friends, and a love for Kyle, and that bounded us together.
Several years and girlfriends later, Houston met Kaylee Whitehall.
Kaylee runs.
Kaylee runs what?
Everything.
She runs what?
Everything. But everything is this. As long as I got this.
Many weren't happy about it.
My first impression of Kaylee was negative because she walked in with a can of alcohol in her hand. I mean, who does that when you go meet your boyfriend's family? I just kind of got a sense of arrogance about her.
I did not approve of her from what he had told me. She was very possessive, did not want him around his friends. She wanted to just control every aspect of his life.
The Bowling Green, Kentucky couple had been off and on for 3.5 years. And their last fight was a big one. A kick her out, I'm moving on, big one. Houston even enlisted the help of his best friend, Dennis Melville.
He was like, hey bro, help me move Kaylee's stuff to the garage. I want it out.
But the very next day, Houston and Kaylee were back together.
I mean, relationships aren't perfect. I mean, there's going to be arguments. They argue. It was nothing too crazy. Until that night.
That night was a Thursday night.
Dennis, his girlfriend Brittany Jones, and her son went over to Houston's and Kaylee's to hang out. But first, to the liquor store.
We went to get us drinks for the night. We went back. I helped my son with his homework, and they started listening to music and having drinks.
But Dennis says Houston wasn't acting like his usual fun-loving self. His relationship with Kaylee was weighing heavily on him.
He's like, hey, I don't think this is gonna work out between you and Kaylee. He's like, yeah, man, I'm not happy, she's not happy, she's like depressed.
After putting her son to bed in the guest room, Brittany joined the others.
Everybody was drunk with me.
And soon Kaylee and Houston were arguing, then yelling and swearing at each other. Then things turned physical.
Somehow he put her in a headlock. I'm like, okay, let her go, Houston, no, let her go. He finally lets her go, and he leaves out the garage.
Kaylee told Brittany she was moving out because of nights like this one.
Just rage came over her. Everything in her sight, she starts picking up and throwing towards him.
A whole lot was going on, like glass, shot glasses, bottles were thrown at him, and I was trying to shield him. And we get back to his bathroom, he's holding his face, he has blood on his hands. And I look at him like, oh my God. There's a cut like right here, it's like a big old gash.
Houston and Dennis come back out to an ever-escalating fight.
Kaylee's still going ballistic.
She goes around to the kitchen and she grabs a knife, like a big butcher knife. And he was like, oh, you want to play with knives?
Brittany says Houston takes the knife from Kaylee and she falls to the ground. Dennis takes the knife away from Houston.
And I'm like, Houston, let her go. And he let her go. And I'm like, Kaylee, okay, it's getting crazy now. You and I, let's just go to my house. And she was like, no, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not leaving my stuff here.
Instead, she goes into the bedroom to take her TV. Houston follows her in, starts cutting the cables, then stops.
He's like, you know what? You ain't getting it. And he reaches around me because I'm standing like a barrier in between them. He hits her in her face. And I'm like, whoa, stop.
Through the hysteria, Brittany manages to pull Kaylee out of the room. Kaylee makes her way back to the bedroom.
By the time I made it back in the room, Dennis and Houston were going in the bathroom, and Dennis closed the bathroom door to separate them.
Kaylee picks up an iron and throws it at the door. Then a thud is heard from the other side of the door. It was Houston.
He collapses, like knees first, and he falls like face first to the ground. I flip him over to check his shirt. He has a puncture wound.
Houston had been stabbed in the chest.
And it was like, oh, no, I want to see. Like, no, he's just faking. He's just drunk. Nothing wrong with him.
She comes into the bedroom, like, really arrogant. Like, this is what you get, like, taunting him over him. Like, man, he's just drunk. I didn't stab him that way. I'm like, wow.
But Houston wasn't faking it. His life was slipping away.
He was like really gassing for her. So she was like, oh, I know I'm about to go to jail.
Medical center EMS. Tell me exactly what happened.
My friend has a puncture wound in his lung, and he needs to go to a hospital ASAP. He can wake up. Wake up. Wake up, man. Oh my God.
I'm trying to resuscitate him, like give him chest press. And he just slowly faded away. And then I think when she realized that he really wasn't breathing anymore, she was like panicked.
Kaylee can be heard in the background of the 911 call.
Please, someone, please. Keep going. Keep going. Keep doing chest compressions with me. You're doing a great job.
It was on that bathroom floor Houston took his last breath.
It's really hard to see him just laying there with his eyes open and light.
I freaked out. I ran to the garage and cried my eyes out until the police came.
Houston Johnson was pronounced dead at the hospital.
I think God put me there in that situation to speak for him, to tell the truth.
Want to know how to get a free phone service and a free tablet? Q-Link Wireless is a government program giving you unlimited data.
A party spirals out of control. When Houston Johnson and his live-in girlfriend Kaylee Whitehall break into a horrible fight.
He hits her in her face. She grabs a knife.
Friends Dennis Melbourne and Brittany Jones try to break it up, but their valiant efforts prove unsuccessful. Stabbed in the chest, Houston collapses and dies on the bathroom floor.
It's my first time I seen somebody die in front of me.
When Houston's ex-fiancée Mandy Tasso learned he had been killed,
one of my first questions was, did Kaylee do it? And all I could think about was having to tell my son his father was gone.
I was in social studies, and I got called down to the office. At first, I thought it was trouble. I saw my mom, and my mom was crying, and I knew something was wrong. And just things were going back from there.
Kaylee was taken down to the Bowling Green Police Department. There, she told lead detective Wade Hughes her relationship with Houston was an abusive one.
I didn't even do anything wrong. I just protected myself because I didn't want him hitting me no more. This just happens all the time. Like, this is our normal thing. He just gets mean and gets abusive, and that's it. That's what happens. But this time I don't even know what to do right now. This is so psycho to me. But that was in this movie. My life is perfect. Like, it really is perfect. Except for this one. It's like crazy.
After Kaylee changed, her clothes were taken into evidence. Detective Hughes dug deeper.
So is the only time that you had the knife was in the kitchen?
Yeah, that's the only time.
So like you wouldn't have had it like in the bedroom, bathroom?
No, it was only in the kitchen.
Next, investigators took Kaylee back to the house. There, Kaylee stuck to her story, saying she only had the knife in the kitchen.
It was a gun knife behind me, and he got me in the shoulder. And I went like this, and I couldn't breathe. And I had a candle right here, and I heard the candle. And I was trying to get it off with me, and it didn't work. There's the knife right here, and I grabbed it, and I went like this. So I came in here, and like, he was laying down, and I don't even know, because he was not normal. Like, he yelled at me, he got vice grips to fix the teeth to get the thing off, and so I didn't even get touched him, and then he just fell down.
How did this get in?
This has been here, this was from tonight, this is another dispute.
Where was the knife?
The knife was on the counter. I don't know where I put it, because I really don't. I don't even know if I threw it when he pushed me back this way, or if I dropped it, or if they picked it up. I really don't know. Honestly, I don't know where it went.
Investigators asked if there was anything else they needed to know.
I just don't want you leaving anything out, because it's always worse if you leave something out than it is if you just are upfront with about it.
Honestly, I have nothing to hide. When I just feel bad that the whole thing's become like this. Oh, God. Do you need anything else from me?
So Kaylee gave her version of events and said she had nothing to hide. But Brittany was about to blow up her story. Although Brittany didn't see the actual stabbing, she remembers Kaylee having the knife in the kitchen and in the bedroom.
Okay, but it was in the room in here.
Yeah.
All right, so.
The thing about, like, I think, I'm not sure, but I think she still had it in her hand when she came out. She was like, I didn't stab her that hard. Like, I think it was still in her hand.
When did you see her with a knife?
I'm thinking, like, when we were out there and she was going to iron. Like, she had, I think that's when I thought it was like before she picked up the iron.
The next day, Detective Hughes interviewed Kaylee again. The audio was recorded. And after being confronted with the facts of the case, Kaylee appeared in about face. Detective Hughes told Kaylee he knew the kitchen wasn't only the place she had a knife.
There were two knifings that actually happened. There was that one, and then there was the one where he was stabbed.
Hughes said he also knew Houston wasn't stabbed by the slashing motion she had demonstrated.
I know from the wound that it likely happened on the frontal, and I know that it came in a downward motion.
Detective Hughes says the investigation brought them to this theory. After Brittany pulled Kaylee away from Houston in the bedroom, Kaylee then grabbed a knife from the kitchen, back into the bedroom, and stabbed Houston in the chest. They refer to a diagram they've drawn.
Inside the evacuating room. Let's take a look.
No, you guys, this is my parents. I don't have to do what I'm happy. Okay, happy. Why did my parents want to get grab me? I should have left. I know I should have left. She was so afraid of everything I did.
During an out-of-control fight, Haley Whitehall stabbed her boyfriend Houston Johnson to death. She first claimed she stabbed him in the kitchen, then changed her story to say it happened in the bedroom.
If you got the man from the counter, you're going to have to take a few steps to use him for a while.
Yes. I don't remember. I just grabbed him and I turned around. And it's so good.
The part of her story that remained the same was the motive. She said it was self-defense, but was it? Some wondered after a curious post on Kaylee's social media raised alarm bells. Written weeks before Houston's death, Kaylee wrote, "Go back to sleep, baby. I'm planning your funeral."
Whether she was trying to play around or not, those thoughts were in her head. They had to have been in her head for her to post that 4 weeks before.
Reportedly, Kaylee said it was just a joke. Either way, more than 2 months after Houston's death, Haley Whitehall was arrested and charged with reckless homicide.
I believe that Kaylee Whitehall intentionally meant to stab Houston.
I was really surprised when that wasn't classified as premeditated murder.
Then, almost a year later, the case went to trial. The prosecutor argued Kaylee recklessly caused Houston's death. Haley's attorney argued she was merely defending herself.
Her attorney wanted to be as if she was fearing for her life. I don't feel like she was fearing for her life. She wasn't fearing for her life at all. In fact, she made it known that she wasn't scared of him.
Among the many witnesses, Detective Hughes described Haley's changing story.
So the final interview, the story changes.
That's correct.
Towards the end of this interview, she tells you that she held the knife in a different position than what she originally told you.
That's correct. She held it with the blade down in her hand like that.
The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict came in 3 hours. Guilty. Haley could have gotten 5 years, but instead...
The jury picks the defendant's sentence of reckless homicide confinement to state penitentiary for a term of 4 years.
I believe that's a slap in the face. This man is doing, and she only got 4 years.
Houston's best friend, Dennis, feels justice hasn't been served.
The shoe was on the other foot. Houston would have been cell blocked the courtroom before his trial even began. If that's what they call justice, I don't know.
And now they're all left to deal with the pain, loss, and for Dennis, guilt.
I blame myself every day. I tried my best to leave and try to squash the argument. It escalated to the point where nobody could control it.
I was making so much money with DoorDash. I wanted to earn money in my free time, but I didn't want to go out and get a boring 9 to 5. That's when I found out how much money my friend was making with DoorDash. There are opportunities in over 4,000 cities. Signing up was super easy. And before long, I was already making deliveries. Now, I get to make my own schedule and keep 100% of my tips. Download the DoorDash driver app and get started today.
Every day, I die over and over again. But now, I'm gonna stop this. Let's take this to the next level.
Mandy feels it's important for people to remember that domestic violence does not discriminate.
Houston is the victim in this case. It doesn't matter your race, your size, your gender. Domestic violence can occur to anyone. And in this case, a white female stabbed a black male. And that is why he's no longer with us.
And to Kaylee, she says,
You may be able to carry on the future after you get out. But I hope you always remember the future you stole from my son.
the son who hopes to forever have his father's love.
Just doing good things, succeeding at everything I do, and even if I do something bad, that he would realize that overall I'm still his son and he would always love me.
Prosecutors say not only was Daniel Warmus boasting about being a part of the Capitol riot inside that dentist's office, they say he was also showing off some video, too. Newly filed charging documents reveal the FBI received a tip Daniel Warmus breached the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th and smoked marijuana while inside from someone who heard him talking all about it at the dentist's office. The FBI says Warmus was even showing off videos in the dentist's office. The tipster heard the video playing but did not see it, the charging documents state. The FBI said the tipster wanted to remain anonymous so agents don't know if they were another patient or the dentist or a dental assistant or an office worker. The tipster called the FBI 6 days after the Capitol breach, and law enforcement has been investigating ever since, arresting the Lancaster, New York man on Tuesday. Investigators say Warmus can be seen on video wearing a CNN is fake news sweatshirt and holding an Antifa flag, entering the Capitol through the Senate wing doors. In other videos, he is seen walking through different parts of the Capitol building, taking pictures and video, and at one point, evading a police officer who was trying to grab him by the backpack. Warmus is now charged with unlawful entry, violent and disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, as well as disrupting government business. He made his first court appearance in upstate New York yesterday. He was released on his own recognizance. Eric Flack, WUSA 9.
The FBI has already arrested hundreds of people they say took part in the insurrection, but they are still looking for many more. And today they released new video of 8 suspects. They are all facing charges for assaulting police. Some of them were seen in the tunnel trying to break through the police line in the Capitol. Another was seen spraying chemicals at officers. We have all these new videos up for you on WUSA9.com.
I'm sure that vehicles such as these will have no trouble escaping the police.
Tonight, new concerns about COVID vaccines and teenagers. The CDC investigating a small number of adolescents who developed a heart condition after vaccination. Is there a connection? Why doctors say your teen should still get the shot. The mass shooting at a house party in New Jersey. 2 killed, more than a dozen wounded, 100 guests fleeing in fear. Witnesses say the shots came from the woods. Disaster in the mountains. 14 people killed in Italy after a cable car carrying tourists plummeted to the ground. 1 child survived, now fighting for his life. The mother of the 6-year-old boy killed in a suspected road rage incident gives an emotional interview. Her message to her son's killer.
I want them to pay for what they've done.
The class of COVID-19. We followed a dozen high school students through this tumultuous school year. The challenges they faced.
Chaotic, stressful, relentless.
And the lessons they learned.
This is NBC Nightly News with Kate Snow.
Good evening. For months, public health officials have been encouraging every American to sign up for a COVID vaccine. And tonight, there's visible progress. New Mexico today became the 9th state where more than 70% of adults have received 1 shot. More than 160 million Americans have received at least 1 dose. And COVID cases and deaths are at their lowest in nearly a year. But for parents considering whether to vaccinate teens, a CDC statement about an extremely rare condition may give them pause. But should it? We begin tonight with Blaine Alexander.
With COVID vaccines now approved for those as young as age 12 and health officials urging parents to take advantage, tonight the CDC is looking into cases of a heart condition possibly linked to the vaccine in adolescents. In a statement this week, the agency notes relatively few reported cases of myocarditis, a condition that causes inflammation in the heart, noting they were found mostly in adolescents and young adults, more often in males, and typically within 4 days of the second shot. The CDC notes they all appear to be mild cases, with this important caveat, that the rates after vaccine have not differed from expected baseline rates.
There's no evidence that this condition is linked to the vaccine at this time. And it's possible that these could be related to other underlying causes, other viral infections or other causes.
Still, for some parents already hesitant to get their child vaccinated, it's not welcome news.
scary, you know, we don't know what could happen and how their bodies are going to adjust to it.
A recent poll conducted before the CDC findings shows nearly a quarter of U.S. parents with children ages 12 through 15 will definitely not get their child vaccinated. Another 26% plan to wait and see.
Bottom line, should parents be concerned about this?
The risk of this condition, if it exists, is extremely low. I don't think there's anything to worry about right now. If I had a 12 to 15-year-old, I would vaccinate them now.
And Blaine joins me now from the CDC. Blaine, why do health officials say it's important to make this information public?
Well, Kate, a big part of that is actually transparency, according to one expert that I spoke to. The CDC also wants doctors to watch for possible symptoms in young people. But again, it's very important to note that the CDC recommends that anybody age 12 or higher get vaccinated, and that guidance has not changed. Kate.
All right, Blaine, thank you. A quiet New Jersey neighborhood is reeling tonight after a deadly mass shooting at a backyard party. And now police are looking for the killer. Lindsay Reiser reports from South Jersey.
A manhunt underway tonight for the shooter after a celebration in Bridgeton, New Jersey ended in bloodshed.
1029 East Commerce Street, a gunshot.
You can see the aftermath of a night of terror. Flipped over tents and tables, debris scattered everywhere after gunshots sent hundreds of partygoers scrambling for safety.
Somebody fired from the woods or came out of the woods, and very tragic and devastating for our whole community.
14 were wounded, 2 left dead.
Complete chaos.
John Fuqua is an advocate who works with young people in the community. Many of his family members were at the party.
15-year-olds to 80-year-olds were having a good time. It was a 90 Things party. It wasn't a shooting gallery. It wasn't a hunting exposition. It was a party.
No arrests have been made, and New Jersey State Police are still investigating what exactly happened. But some fear this may have been a targeted ambush.
This was something set up. They trapped them in that yard.
Bridgeton has struggled with increasing crime and poverty rates. Community leaders describe last night's mass shooting as a setback.
We've had a lot of violence in our community, a lot of fighting. And we're working so hard. That's the saddest thing.
And Lindsay Reiser joins us now live from that scene. Lindsay, what do we know so far about the victims?
Okay, we know that a 25-year-old woman and 30-year-old man both died at the scene, and the governor of New Jersey, who called this mass shooting cowardly and despicable, will hold a press briefing tomorrow morning. Kate? All right, Lindsay, thank you. We are following breaking news from northern Italy tonight. A cable car that shuttles tourists and families to an amusement park in the Alps fell 60 feet today, crashing into the mountain below, killing all but one person on board. The lone survivor, a boy, now fighting for his life. Matt Bradley has late details.
Tonight, tragedy in Italy after a cable car at a mountain resort plummeted, killing at least 14 people in Italy's northern Piedmont region. Rescuers struggled to reach the remote mountainside where the gondola fell. The only survivor, one child in serious condition, airlifted to a hospital in nearby Turin. The cable cars take tourists from the city of Stresa on the banks of Lake Maggiore to a theme park atop Mount Maggiore. The 20-minute ride offers stunning alpine views to as many as 40 tourists in each car. Officials say the accident is a terrible blow just as the country eases its COVID rules. These people thought they were going on a nice day out, the region's mayor says. Instead, it's been an awful disaster. The system was renovated only 5 years ago and had just reopened after COVID rules lifted. Italy's alpine cable cars are normally safe. Today's tragedy was the worst accident since 1998, when a low-flying U.S. military jet cut through a ski lift in the Dolomite Mountains, killing 20 people. Now rescue workers saying tonight's death toll may climb even higher. Matt Bradley, NBC News.
The White House late today speaking out about a disturbing rise in anti-Semitic violence in this country. One of the latest incidents happened last night in Brooklyn, New York. An official says a group was yelling "Free Palestine" and harassing Jewish people in front of a synagogue. Police say the same group is suspected of later attacking 2 Jewish teens. The White House says it's working alongside community organizations to condemn other recent attacks. There were rallies across the country today honoring George Floyd. The coming week marks 1 year since he was killed by a Minneapolis police officer. So tonight, we're starting a week-long series of reports about his death, the global protests it sparked, and just how much has changed since he's been gone. Shaquille Brewster reports.
Tonight, the start of emotional commemorations to mark a year since George Floyd's death.
He changed people's mindsets, like the world.
Americans gathering nationwide for marches in New York.
If we don't get no justice,
to a rally in Minneapolis where he was murdered.
In this moment, we understand as people, we deserve to live.
George Floyd's death sparked sustained calls for police reform, including from President Biden, asking Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act by this week. The bill stalled in bipartisan negotiations.
It's absolutely necessary that we do something.
But experts say changes are sweeping across the country at an impressive pace. At least 3,000 policing-related bills introduced in state legislatures, more than 30 states enacting new police oversight and reform laws. Common reforms including bans on chokeholds and neck restraints, updates to use of force and de-escalation policies, and new expanded body camera policies. But some lawmakers reacting in the opposite direction. Georgia now setting limits to police budget cuts. Changes also happening within individual departments. The Minneapolis Police Department now banning neck restraints and requiring officers to document and justify any time they unholster a weapon.
What do you think of the changes we've seen in the past year?
I don't think that's going to make the difference. The policy changes aren't going to make a difference. We've changed policies for years, you know.
What makes the difference?
Is getting to know your community.
A year later, some unifying pleas for more change and more justice.
And Shaq joins me now from that march in Minneapolis. There's more than just a rally planned, right?
That's right, Kate. Today is just day one of what will be 3 days of commemorations, not just here in Minneapolis, but really all across the country, including in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, when President Biden plans to host members of the Floyd family at the White House. Kate?
All right, Shaq, thank you. Still ahead tonight, a mother's emotional plea to help catch the road rage shooter who killed her young son. Also, what was this tumultuous school year like? We followed a dozen high school students through it all. We're back with new details about that deadly road rage incident on a California freeway that left a little boy dead. The 6-year-old's heartbroken mother now making a new plea to the public to help police find the killer. Quad Venegas reports from Southern California.
He just didn't deserve that. No one deserves that.
Joanna Clunan is living a mother's worst nightmare. Her 6-year-old son, Aiden Lales, was killed in the backseat of her car. Authorities saying he was struck by a bullet in a road rage incident.
I want them to pay for what they've done.
Heartbroken, she's now sharing the details of the horrifying ordeal in hopes of catching the perpetrators.
It looked like a wagon, and there was a female driver and a male in the passenger seat. And it felt very aggressive from the start.
She says the vehicle cut her off before the gunshot.
As I was merging away from the carpool lane, I heard a loud noise, and I heard my son say, "Ow."
A bullet entering the vehicle through the trunk, striking Aiden, who was sitting in the booster seat.
And he had been shot, and I tried to save him while calling 911, but he was losing a lot of blood.
Aiden was pronounced dead after being taken to a nearby hospital. Authorities continue asking the public for help.
If you were driving by, you saw something that was not right, call it in.
As investigators work the case and search for clues, a growing memorial for Aiden sits over the scene of his tragic shooting, his family mourning the loss.
To have that taken from us is the loss is it's unspeakable. I mean, I've raised 3 kids. I mean, I know kids. And this little baby just wanted to bless everybody around him.
That's just so young to die, and I would just want him to have more time in his life.
A life cut too short for an innocent victim of road rage. Quad Venegas, NBC News.
Just heartbreaking. Coming up, kids under pressure. We followed a dozen young high school students for the entire school year.
Do you feel you were on the brink of a breakdown?
This was the breakdown.
how this challenging year changed them forever. We're back with our special report about the tremendous pressure the pandemic put on students. We've been following more than a dozen high school students across the country for this entire school year, chronicling their ups and all too frequent downs. Now, with classes ending, our Rahima Ellis caught up with them yet again to discuss lessons learned and what's ahead.
All across the country, students have been tested like never before.
I'd say overwhelming.
I was just struggling all the time.
At the very beginning, everything was just chaotic.
Since the beginning of the school year, we've been following more than a dozen high school students throughout the nation.
It was nice to be back.
These first couple of days were definitely, I had a lot of doubt.
Their challenges were both academic and emotional. What 3 words would you use to describe the school year?
Unprecedented, chaotic, and a bit stressful.
Stressful, different,
kind of relentless.
Were there moments that were overwhelming?
Yeah, there were actually some nights where I have cried over exactly that.
But at the beginning of the school year, many were optimistic.
I feel like it's just going to be fine.
However, as early as October, a wave of anxiety hit, constantly dealing with glitches online.
The whole thing would just like kick me out and say your connection was lost.
Some only had access on cell phones.
It's hard for me because I can't sit and stare at one thing for a long amount of time.
It got even harder by December as schools went through a mix of remote and in-person learning. Students felt disconnected from school and classmates.
It's kind of been a weird transition. I don't know. It just feels empty since like half of the students are there.
Just 2 months later, in February, students were still mostly remote and still on edge.
Basically, it sucks.
We're all really struggling.
I've never felt so much stress in one school year.
For many, how they attended school was often shifting. This map shows the changes week to week across the country. Districts moving from fully remote in blue to hybrid in yellow to in-person in green and sometimes back. Looking back at video clips, students like Ohio freshman Cam Miller saw themselves struggling.
This is rough. It's hard to... It's frustrating. That's what I should say. It's very frustrating.
Your reaction, Cam?
I do remember how I felt in that moment, and it did suck.
For Allegra, a junior in Chicago, it was overwhelming.
I know I was upset and stressed because I was scared that, well, I didn't know what was going on or how to do the assignment.
Do you feel you were on the brink of a breakdown?
This was the breakdown. It was definitely like one of the 2 breakdowns I had during the school year.
And when John, our junior in Pennsylvania, saw himself, a nod acknowledging where he was.
I feel disheartened and I feel sort of like everything's out of control and I just kind of have to hold on as tight as I can.
John's grade slipped, and so did his self-esteem. When you watched this, I saw your face, and you got a little tense there for a moment.
Yeah, I felt some of those lows we had this year. You know, it felt like I was punching a brick wall, trying my absolute hardest, and it felt like I was getting nothing in return.
But that feeling didn't last. He and other students learned how to adjust.
I didn't just learn about how to adapt to make my grades better. I learned about how to adapt for myself and make myself happy.
It's changed us, some of us for the better, some of us for the worse. So this was a really formative time period for all of us.
Having found ways to cope.
Like maybe just take a break and put down the computer for like 30 minutes.
Learning to not be frustrated as easy as I used to be.
Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself of 9 months ago?
I'd say nothing can be perfect, and you should accept and expect change.
Don't let things hold you back and failures hold you back. Use them as learning experiences.
It just takes perseverance, and you just gotta get through it.
For these students, an education in resilience that could last a lifetime. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
Tough year. Still ahead, the college comeback for a Super Bowl champion. How he finally found the inspiration to get back to school. There's good news tonight about persistence and the inspiration we draw from our families. Tina Turner helped the 49ers win 4 Super Bowls back in the 1980s, but last weekend was a special victory, 4 decades in the making.
Congratulations.
Tina Turner was back in the stadium at Purdue University, but not as a linebacker this time. After the NFL drafted him during his senior year at Purdue and cut college short, the former NFL star finally graduated right alongside his 22-year-old daughter, Ella. Play by play, what it was like, to be there, to be on your old campus in the stadium, right?
That was just an unbelievable moment for me, where I have all these, memories and emotion.
Tina says he wasn't really a serious student when he left to play 11 seasons with the 49ers. He eventually earned a degree from the University of San Francisco, but his unfinished education at Purdue was always on his mind.
It was something that was always hanging there for me.
So when Ella decided to be a Boilermaker, he followed.
Once I heard that, then, I was in. Then I'm like, let's go.
I didn't even think that it would be like a possibility, like to do something that cool, like with your parent,
Since he had college credits, he was only a few classes short. During Ella's junior year, he started taking classes remotely.
You remember how physical geography, kicking my butt.
When COVID hit, they ended up studying in the same house.
So there were times when I had my wife and Ella and my son Miles working on something, helping me, and my oldest daughter on the phone trying to guide me through, different things to make this happen. So it was definitely a family effort along the way.
All that work for this moment. You could have given up on this Purdue dream.
I don't think giving up was an option on this one. And, it's a tagline to say, it's never too late. But I hope this is an example of that being really true.
A dream achieved together.
I love you, sweetheart. You will always be my baby girl.
Love you too.
By the way, Tina still works for the 49ers in management, and Ella's planning to move to Phoenix with a degree in sales, and one day she hopes to start her own business. That is NBC Nightly News on this Sunday night. Lester Holt will be back with you tomorrow. I'm Kate Snow. For all of us here at NBC News, stay safe and have a great night.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
Always wondering if your home is safe? Giant hassle. But getting the Vivid Smart Security System? No hassles there. What's up, Troy? All the measuring, all the installing, it's all done for you.
Also this morning, the man police say hit a 16-year-old girl and then took off. He's waking up in jail.
That's right. It's tons of the family and friends of Deanne Gomez are gathering to remember her today. Local 10's Trent Kelly joins us live from Miami with more on how they're reacting to the break in this case. Trent, just such a sad situation.
Yeah, very terrible situation here for this family. In fact, we should tell you the news of that arrest actually came down yesterday right as some family members were gathering here at this funeral home in Miami, preparing for the victim's viewing. Her own uncle using some very strong words to describe the suspect in this case. All of this happening as the family reconvenes today to say their final goodbyes. 60-year-old Jose Thimia arrested by police after he's accused of hitting and killing a teenage girl with his car and then taking off.
You broke my family. You killed my niece.
The crash killing 16-year-old Deanne Gomez Sanchez. Her family reacting to the arrest while gathering for her viewing late Friday.
I think you are criminal. You're not human.
She just started high school. She started night.
Her body discovered earlier in the week by one of her uncles on the side of the 79th Street Causeway. Police believe Deanne was hit by a car, the driver never even stopping to help.
If you see the that why you must stop and try to help.
2 days later, investigators found this Toyota Corolla less than a mile away, the windshield shattered with strands of Diani's blue hair. The driver later arrested and identified as 60-year-old Jose Thimia.
Stay in the jail for the rest of his life because my family is not going to be the same anymore.
According to his arrest report, detectives say Thimia attempted to clean blood from the front of the car and even removed the hubcaps in an effort to cover up his involvement. Despite the arrest, Diani's family says nothing will ever bring their loved one back.
You'll be my nightmare for the rest of my life.
And we did see Diani's family leave the funeral home here a short time ago. They are now heading to the cemetery for her burial. We should tell you the suspect in this case still being held in TGK this morning on several charges. He is expected to go before a judge sometime later today. As soon as that happens, we'll post an update for you on our website, local10.com. For now, we are live here in Miami this morning. Trent Kelly, Local 10 News.
Hey, I'm Bobby Lee from Square. Guess what? Square has APIs and SDKs that allow you to go
Atlanta police say a man suspected of killing his ex-girlfriend in South Georgia is now dead after taking his own life following a police chase and crash. And that is our top story this morning. Mara Siriani joining us live from DeKalb County outside GBI headquarters with more details. And Mara, it sounds like this investigation has just begun. It has, Sheba. Thomaston police telling us the 42-year-old man was a suspect in the murder of his ex-girlfriend. It happened earlier in the day yesterday inside of her Thomaston home. That man then drove to Atlanta where that chase and crash happened. Let's show you video from that scene because several agencies remained on scene, but it all happened around 6:30 last night. The crash did. Troopers were in the area of the Home Depot along Ponce when they noticed that suspect's vehicle. The man's identified by Thomaston police as 42-year-old John Bucky. Wanted again for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Ladonna Smith, inside his home yesterday. Troopers tried to pull Bucky's vehicle over in Atlanta, and they didn't refuse, and that is when that chase began. So John Bucky was slammed into another vehicle. He had two steps after he was completely invested and turned a gun on himself inside of his own vehicle. GBI Atlanta police and the Fulton County medical examiner all responded to that scene. And this morning it's still under investigation, but right now police say there are no other suspects. And Laura, do you know anything more about the murder in Thomaston that started all of this? As you mentioned, this really just getting underway as far as the investigation goes. We know that it was some type of dispute inside of the victim's home that led to the murder. We also know that the suspect and the victim have a child together. We don't know if anyone else is inside of the home of the murder. All right, Mara Siriani, thank you.
What this does is to prove once again how powerful that symbol of the pyramid actually is.
It's only been in recent years that we've had the technology to actually answer the question, does the shape of a pyramid influence or interact with energy in our world?
The Star of David was created in likeness of the pyramids, but also represents what so much of Egyptian mythology talks about, which is duality.
When you look into North America,
Family members have identified a man who was found dead in the Woodstock area. They tell us 29-year-old Nicholas Brown was shot and killed last night. His family held a vigil for him this evening. News Projects reporter Bree Isom was at the vigil. Bree, you've learned a lot about the family, him, and how they're remembering him.
The family tells me Nicholas had the kindest heart, and he's very missed, and he was taken way too soon. Now they're asking if anyone witnessed what happened last night to please come forward because they just want to know what happened.
It was so shocking that I couldn't breathe or think.
Anna Burke says on Friday night she got a text from a family member saying her brother was dead. Her brother, 29-year-old Nicholas Brown, was found dead by police on Nelson Avenue late Friday night. Police are speaking to witnesses about what happened that night. Witnesses say they heard multiple gunshots.
It wasn't no one shot that killed him. It wasn't no two shots. You know what I'm saying? From my understanding, he was shot over and over. It took a whole big old chunk out of my heart.
Give us what we need, God. Give us that strength, God. Family got together hours later for a vigil to honor his life.
Yeah, he'll give you the shirt off his side. That's what I'm trying to understand. Why did he get gunned down like that?
Family wore purple and held purple balloons to symbolize royalty. They say Nicholas was the king of the family.
Nicholas was very dear to our heart, and he didn't deserve to be taken away so soon.
Police got reports of a fight that led up to the shooting. Investigators are still working to confirm that. And family tells me that police do have a suspect in custody, but we're still working to confirm that with JSO. They did not return my calls. But family's also asking if you know anything about what happened last night, please contact the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I'm live in Jacksonville. Bree Isom, Channel 4, the local station.
People are not asking the right questions. They're not asking the right questions because they kind of think they already know the answers.
Technology is being used that we would never believe was possible.
Beginning in 1954, gravity control was mastered.
Nazi Germany, they were developing flying saucer technology using anti-gravity.
With the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial vehicles, we figured out zero-point energy. If that were to come out, it would be...
Breaking news tonight, the ceasefire in the Middle East after 11 days of deadly violence. Israel announcing the truce with Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, after the fighting that's killed at least 230 Palestinians and 12 Israelis. Just moments ago, President Biden's reaction from the White House after pushing for an end to the hostilities. Also, COVID vaccinations, how soon could you need a booster shot? What the CEO of Pfizer is saying. The anti-Asian hate crimes law signed by President Biden, the new protections after a rise in attacks. The 11-year-old who fought off an alleged kidnapper speaking out how her quick thinking helped police identify the suspect, and the TV show that gave her the idea. Our journey across America to Seattle, my exclusive with the mayor, how the nation's first COVID epicenter reversed course to lead the charge for community immunity, and my conversation with the CEO of Alaska Airlines, what he says about how much longer masks will be required on planes, plus the COVID precautions to expect on planes, at hotels and theme parks this summer travel season.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, across America, reporting tonight from Seattle.
Good evening from Seattle, a center of innovation and technology and a place having notable success in vaccinating its population. What the mayor here told me about reaching community immunity in a few minutes. But first, there's breaking news as we come on the air. A ceasefire slated to be taking effect right now between Israel and Hamas after an 11-day-long conflict that left death, misery, and flattened neighborhoods in Gaza and traumatized Israeli communities under a deadly barrage of daily rocket fire. Just a short time ago, President Biden applauding the truce and calling it an opportunity as the world holds its breath that the peace continues.
On Friday, Republican Representative Matt Gaetz tweeted out that he was headed to Mesa, Arizona for one of his idiotic rallies with Marjorie Taylor Greene. He was super excited, expecting a great crowd, and the guy continues to pretend like his life is not a raging dumpster fire back home. Because it is. And honestly, I kind of love what's happening right now. Over the past week, we have had countless breaking stories about the trouble that Matt Gaetz is in, and each story that comes out, of course, implicates him even further. Obviously, last Monday, Greenberg switched his plea from not guilty to guilty. They dropped 27 charges against him as part of this plea deal. So yeah, he's flipped on Matt Gaetz. couple days after that, we get the story about Big Joe Ellicott down in Florida, who was an associate of Greenberg. Their text messages were revealed where they admitted they knew one of the women in question was in fact underage. Everybody needed to lawyer up. We also know that there was a subpoena from back in December to Ellicott, specifically seeking any communications that he had had with either Greenberg or Matt Gaetz, which confirms that Matt Gaetz is in fact a target of this investigation. Not just somebody mentioned, not just somebody named here and there. Gaetz is a target. Gaetz is being investigated. And he's pretending like nothing's happening. He went on the OWN network last Thursday night talking about nonsense. He's tweeting out all kinds of things about, we've got to preserve the integrity of the Arizona ballot audit. I'm heading to Arizona to attack my fellow Republicans. Life is great. I am smug. Nothing bad ever happens to me, so just please ignore all of these horrible, horrible stories. Please ignore all of the Venmo receipts that are now public, all the text messages that are now public. Yeah, I'm totally okay. And at this point, I honestly can't determine whether or not Matt Gaetz is doing this as a bit of a PR strategy or because he legitimately thinks he's okay. So let's take a look at both of those real quick. First and foremost, maybe Gaetz actually does think he's not going to get in trouble for this. That wouldn't be surprising considering the fact that Gaetz has gotten away with just about everything for his entire life. And the DUIs, of course, the one everybody always comes back to.
We expect the unexpected. Okay.
Right? The guy should have faced severe, stiff penalties for the DUIs, but Daddy, in the state of Florida, had a lot of power, got him out of trouble. Gaetz' own friends from high school have admitted that the guy never grew up. He's still the same guy he was back when he was 18 years old. He hasn't shifted out of that mentality because he's never had to. He has been protected by powerful people for his entire life. So maybe he thinks everything is hunky-dory and he doesn't need to worry about anything. Or, and I do think this one's the more likely, he's trying to run this slick PR campaign, going out there telling people that, look, it's a witch hunt against me. Where have we heard that one? Oh, they're trying to take me down because really they're trying to get to you. He's already said that, and Trump has said the same things. He's really, literally trying the Trump defense. Pretend it's not happening. Say that you're the victim, just like he did in the early days. Remember, like, what happened with the blackmail scheme, right? That was the first thing he said. Like, no, my family's being blackmailed. My father is wearing a wire. And yeah, that fizzled out real damn quick. It fizzled out really quick once we got all the receipts. I mean, literally got the receipts. So that's where we're at right now. Gaetz continues to just whistle past the graveyard, pretending, at least publicly, that nothing bad is ever going to happen to him. But I have no doubt in my mind this ends with Matt Gaetz going to jail. Unless, of course, Matt Gaetz has bigger people to flip on. You know, maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. I don't think it is. I would think if it were, investigators would be already working with Matt Gaetz trying to flip him. But he's the target. We know that now. The subpoenas to other individuals proved it. Seeking their communications with Matt shows that Matt is the one they're looking at. The fact that they've got Greenberg already flipping on him, the fact that they're trying to get the ex-girlfriend to flip on him, Matt Gaetz is toast. He knows that his days are numbered, not just in Congress, but perhaps even as a free man. So he can pretend otherwise all he wants. But the evidence that's available right now doesn't paint a rosy picture for Matt Gaetz' future.
Definitely helped me make the jump in life. The instructor was just amazing. I'm going to have a skill set for life. There's always going to be a job for welders. If you like working with your hands and you want to be a welder, go to Tulsa Welding School.
Onision. This story is fascinating.
He has cult status on the internet and amongst YouTube.
Alexa Palovicki bailed out of the Sacramento County Jail. That's right behind me, just hours after her arrest this afternoon. It all stems from a months-long investigation into allegations she falsified police reports. Tonight, I speak with Sacramento's Police Chief Daniel Hahn about her arrest and his plans for change.
Takes away from the trust our community has in us, and not just in that one employee, but everybody that wears this uniform.
That's Sacramento's top cop on the arrest of one of his own officers. The 26-year-old Alexa Palovicki, seen here posing in a 2019 Sacramento Police Department photo, faces 2 felony counts for falsifying police reports stemming from separate traffic stops last July while she was on duty. Court documents allege she falsely reported a driver DUI and another for changing lanes without signaling.
Not only did an individual officer see something that they didn't think was right, but the department then took immediate action. She's been on administrative leave since.
The department spent 5 months investigating the criminal allegations and has since launched an internal audit looking over her arrests and reports in her 3 years with the department. The Sacramento County District Attorney's Office has thrown out any cases Palovicki played a major role in while continuing to review prior cases.
To ensure that our officers, our professional staff are keeping with the highest standards of our department.
Chief Hahn is making changes to prevent this from happening again, including the creation of an inspection and standards team tasked with ensuring fellow officers are following law and policy. In a statement to ABC 10, Palovicki's attorney asked the community to reserve judgment until the day she has in court. He went on to say that, like anyone charged with a crime, Officer Palovicki is entitled to due process. Now, because of the seriousness of these legal implications involved with the allegations of falsifying police reports, as well as the potential for mistrust with the public, falsifying a police report is considered by some in law enforcement as one of perhaps the most egregious offenses that officers can commit, and her legal troubles and battles are likely to be just beginning. Chris?
Our Giacomo Luca reporting live for us tonight. And, we're digging deeper into this case. Sacramento police had 275 complaints last year. That is according to their Office of Internal Affairs. 23 complaints for dishonesty. And last year, there were at least 2 terminations and 1 resignation.
A former Buffalo, New York police officer who was fired from her job more than a decade ago has just won a lawsuit to reinstate her pension. Carrie Horn says she was terminated after she intervened with a white colleague who tried to choke a black suspect back in 2006. Horn was fired 2 years later, just a few months before she was set to become eligible for her full pension. But just this week, a judge reversed the dismissal and reinstated Horn's pension. He said the city of Buffalo, quote, has recognized the error and has acknowledged the need to undo an injustice from the past. Horn recently spoke with our colleague Jerika Duncan about this decision and why she is still pushing for changes to how police officers operate.
We don't want other officers to go through what I've gone through, but we don't want other victims to go through what George Floyd went through.
And Ms. Horn joins us now, along with her attorney, Intisar Rob. Thank you both for joining us. Ms. Horn, let me begin with you. You've had a few days now to process the judge's reversal to reinstate your pension. Describe to our audience what this victory means to you.
Well, the victory is bittersweet. I am actually very happy that, I got some justice. But to see the police killings going on still, it's upsetting.
I want to dig deeper into that and how you feel about what you've been seeing with the Derek Chauvin trial and the other things that have been happening in the news. But I want to ask your attorney, this has been a very long battle. This is not the first time that you have been in court arguing in favor of her pension being reinstated. Can you tell me sort of ultimately how you and your partner Ron Sullivan were able to get this win, and what the judge said when he overturned the termination?
Sure. So this is a case that started 15 years ago when Perico acted to save a life. My colleagues and I, Ron Sullivan and Neil Eggleston, we just joined in July of this year. And so Perico had been through multiple court dates. This was a moment where we joined the case because we thought that we could really advocate for her to find some justice, even when they said it was impossible. The decision relied on two laws, two bases. One was Carriol's law that Carriol's team and Carriol for Justice got passed in October of 2020 that created a cause of action to file. But we'd actually filed a little bit before Carriol's law was passed, asking the judge, in the interest of justice, to retroactively correct the record from that time. Nunc pro tunc, Latin phrase for fix what was wrong in the past.
So, Ms. Bourne, last year the mayor signed the Duty to Intervene law, which you helped push through, and it makes clear that Buffalo police officers have the responsibility to get involved when they think a colleague's actions are inappropriate. What was the significance of getting this law passed? And again, as Anne-Marie pointed out, I mean, we've all seen by now the video of George Floyd, and it wasn't just former police officer Derek Chauvin that was, I mean, obviously he was the one with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, but there were other police officers around and watching it happen. Do you think something like this would have had a tangible effect in Minneapolis?
Definitely. I wrote the law in 2016. I just did not know how to get it passed. So that's when the team, the justice team, and the advocates, the protesters, and Terry Watson, who's the founder of Strategies for Justice, that's when he came forward and helped me put it in, write it in a way that it was presentable to give to the council so that they could pass it. So had they, first of all, not fired me in 2008, or even if someone that I had spoken to in the past in 2016 when I wrote it, if they had taken that, then George taken it and pushed it then maybe George Floyd would be he would be here today, because that law could have been passed here and on a national level by now.
Carol, sometimes I think when we cover your story, because it's been 20 years since the 2006 incident, people don't have a real clear sense of what you endured and what you did. So can you take us back to 2006, the incident that started this all? You come to the scene, I think it was a domestic violence call. Other officers are already there. You walk into the house, and there is a suspect being subdued by another police officer, one of your colleagues, who is punching that suspect in the face. Everyone gets outside, including the suspect, and what do you see that you feel the need? You have to intervene. How do you intervene, and what happens after that?
Well, first of all, the mailman flagged an officer down. So it wasn't a call. It was that somebody called 911. An officer was flagged down, and then they barged their way into Neil Mack's house. So we never should have been in the house in the first place. It was an argument between him and his girlfriend that could have probably been settled once they settled down. But outside of the house, that is when he started choking Neil Mack. And that is when I grabbed his arm from around his neck. Now, they came up with this elaborate story about me jumping on the back and pushing another officer, causing her injury, and things that I didn't do. I mean, when I read the article, I thought, wow, I must have been Superman to be able to do all of that. But now it's really important that officers who are standing by, that they do something, that they intervene. And the reason it's called Carrio's Law, and that we push for it to be called Carrio's Law, is because we want people to know why it's really important. You know, Neil Mack still lives, and Neil Mack still lives because I intervened. And if I had to do it all over again, I would do everything the same way so that I could make change in this whole world, not just here in Buffalo, New York, because we need a national registry. It doesn't make sense if an officer from here is a bad officer and they go to another city or state. If the law is not in effect there, then it's no good.
Let me also pull back
and, you know, to be clear, like, the other officers that were on the scene did not back you up. And you can, I thought I heard an interview where you said the officer that you did intervene on, eventually, while you lost your job, that officer was able to keep his job. But right now, he doesn't have his job anymore. Where is he?
Well, first of all, he was promoted, and he choked another officer that was on duty. And this was separate from my incident. And then he went to jail. He went to federal prison and went to jail for exactly what I did. When I said that he was using unnecessary force, that is what he went to jail for. And he does still collect a pension.
Carrio's Law will hopefully encourage officers to intervene when they see something that is wrong, that is unlawful, that is violating someone's rights. But we know that you can pass a law. Passing a law is very different than changing the culture. Do you think the law is enough? What else needs to be done so that officers feel brave enough to intervene when they see one of their colleagues doing the wrong thing?
Well, I constantly heard the problem, and I wanted to come up with a solution of what will make an officer have to do their job. It shouldn't take a law, just like you just kind of mentioned. It should not take a law for them to do that. But if it is a law and they can be held accountable for that law, then they will be more willing to do it. So there are a lot of good officers who do want to do something, but they consider bad officers because they don't. So Carrio's Law will put them in a position to where they have to do something, and the bad officers can't bully them, but they shouldn't be on the department anyway if they let somebody bully them. So, I mean, it's really important to push this law nationally, globally.
Mm-hmm. At Best Buy, we're celebrating you, the tech obsessed, because you know the latest tech has the power to make life better. And no matter what you're obsessing about next, we're right there with you. Online, in store, at your door. Best Buy. Let's talk about what's possible.
Ms. Rob, let me ask you about, let me sort of pull back a bit and talk about others who may be seeking to sue cities or municipalities or police departments over perceived injustices. One of the things that you hear often from police officers, from attorneys, is that oftentimes people, including George Floyd and Dante Wright and others, find themselves in these situations because, and you hear this over and over and over again, because they refuse to comply. That's a term that I hear so often, and I wonder, I understand complying with the police officer's instructions. I think everybody does. But oftentimes, what if, you know, the question that I guess I would have is, what if a police officer's instructions are unlawful or they're an infringement of my rights? I mean, is the idea such that you should comply with a police officer at all times, no matter what it is that they say or they do, and then seek you out or somebody like you to sue that department or sue that municipality? I mean, is that the way, I mean, is that the instructions that we are all supposed to sort of take under advisement and guidance?
Well, unfortunately, I think those are the instructions that a lot of Black families have with their young men because there's something broken in the system. Police officers are there to serve and protect. That's the mantra of every police force or union in most states in this country. They're servants, public servants of the people. So failure to comply is fundamentally a capital offense. I don't know of any statute, law, police code that makes failure to comply a capital offense. So it should not be that police officers are authorized to take a life, as we saw just this week and last week, for failure to comply in many of the cases that you mentioned. So I think that the right answer is to ensure through every means possible, through legislation like Cariol's law, through advocacy like the type of advocacy that we did when the justice system failed, that ideally you have a change in the culture, the laws, the norms, and the practices that make it so that you never serve up injustice or improper death sentences without a trial in the first place.
And is it? Do you feel? And I guess I'll ask both of you this. Starting with you, Ms. Robb, do you feel that if Derek Chauvin is convicted in his trial, that will also have an effect on how police officers behave when they are dealing with suspects, or not?
I do think so. I think that Cariol's case can have a precedential value, not in the way that lawyers may typically think of it, and as the Supreme Court binding people to follow what this courageous New York judge did in her case. But it set every victory of this type, so Cariol's case and a conviction in the case of Derek Chauvin, I think would send the message that we the people want to send to police officers, to ordinary citizens, that the law can and will be a vehicle of justice.
Yeah, that's what I guess that was also my question, Ms. Horn, is it feels as if what we're seeing in Minneapolis sort of goes hand in hand with Cariol's law.
It definitely goes hand in hand, because those officers stood by and did nothing, and George Floyd lost his life where Neil Mack still lives. And as far as the system being broken, you have to have people like Judge Ward in the system to change that. And as far as the systemic racism, it exists because they created it. So that's what we have to chop down little by little. And then they gaslight us and make us feel like we're delusional when we say something about it. And we're not delusional. The protesters, they say the protesters are an angry mob. No, they're an angry group of people. The mob is the one that is shooting the rubber bullets at them or tear gassing them, because they are standing up saying,
anybody grip on the Republican Party, the Washington Post has found that online talk about the former president no, it's plunged to a 5-year low. They're not talking about him.
What are you talking about?
Trump's aides have set his new website, which includes a blog, fundraising page, and online storefront, would redefine the game. But in reality, the site is seeing few visitors. A Washington Post review of data from 4 online analytics firms found that social engagement around Trump, a measure of likes, reactions, comments, or shares of content about him across Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Pinterest, have nosedived 95% since January.
Well, I mean,
lowest level since 20.
If he gets banned from every site, yes, it's going to nosedive.
That's true.
I don't know where you're supposed to get likes. Are people supposed to throw hearts on the street?
Well, they can click right there, but they're not going there.
He's been banned everywhere.
And then there's this. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is comparing the House mask rules to the Holocaust. The Georgia Congresswoman said, quote, "We can look back in a time in history where people were told to wear a gold star, and they were definitely treated like second-class citizens, so much so they were put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany."
Just stop reading
and
that,
this
please.
is
Just
exactly the type of abuse that Nancy Pelosi is talking about. A day later, Republican Congressman Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina had a comparison of his own, implying the British would not have surrendered at Yorktown if George Washington had been wearing a mask. And said Americans are, quote, descended from people of valor.
Yes, we
who
are.
stood up for their own personal liberty.
The only difference really is that some of us still believe that we are a people of valor. We've descended from people of valor. We are still a people of valor. We have had greatness in the past. We have been an exceptional country in the past. We are still an exceptional country. American exceptionalism, my God, look at what's happened over the past year, and I will say it again. With Republican administrations developing the vaccine, Democratic administrations distributing the vaccines, doctors and scientists who really didn't care about politics. They cared about doing something that had never been done before in the history of mankind, move as quickly towards a vaccine as they were able to do in 9, 10, 11 months. My God, you look at our numbers collapsing. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know there are a lot of people in the Insurrectionist Party that don't believe this, but America's still great. There still is exceptionalism. We still are a great nation. And you can try to make us weak. You can try to claim our army's weaker than Russia's. You can do whatever you want to do. You're wrong. I'll say what I've said to liberals my whole life that I'm saying now to you in the Insurrectionist Party. Bet against the United States of America, and you lose every time.
And there are Republicans. And then there's insurrectionists.
Right. There's three parties. We have to make it. You brought that up early this morning. I think that's so important for people in the media to understand. Don't lump all Republicans in with the insurrectionists.
They're not Republicans.
You have a Republican Party, you have a Democratic Party, and you have an insurrectionist party. Let's start identifying these three different parties as such, because it's in the best interest of the country to have a strong Republican Party. It's in the best interest of the country to actually have a party that once again becomes conservative. They haven't been conservative in a very long time. They have spent, as I've said, for 20 years like drunken socialists. It's time for them to find their bearings. It's good for us.
Right now, a lot of us need insurance that's simple and affordable. That's why we created Sidecar Health. With lower monthly costs, no deductibles, and access to any doctor you want to see, it's health insurance the way it should be. Get started today at sidecarhealth.com.
To have a Republican and a Democratic Party. This insurrectionist party's got to work itself out. But we don't help that process along if we just blur the lines between Republicans and insurrectionists.
So joining us now, senior columnist for the Daily Beast, Matt Lewis, plus contributing writer at The Atlantic, Pete Wehner, joins us. And Pete, in your latest article entitled "Trump is Marching Down the Road to Political Violence," you quote Abraham Lincoln, writing in part, "At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected?" The 28-year-old Lincoln asked. I answer, "If it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide." For those of us who have spent much of our political life in the Republican Party, who knew it was partly flawless, but who did believe in its promise and core principles, it's painful to acknowledge that the party of Lincoln helped build, now embodies the very dangers that Lincoln warned about. But how did that happen, Pete? I guess the first question is.
Well, it's a long and complicated story, Mika, but I think what happened is that the Republican Party became gripped by grievances, victimization mentality,
and then conspiracy theories. It moved away from philosophy, as Joe was alluding to, or any interest in ideas. It became performative. These trends started before Trump. Trump became president, and he accelerated all of the worst tendencies. And I quite agree with Joe. I think it's important to disaggregate the Republican Party, a sane party, from an insurrectionist party. My concern is that the base of the party identifies very much with the insurrectionist wing. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's flat out insane, is more popular not only among the base of the Republican Party than Liz Cheney, but with the leadership of the party. And that's the great struggle. But Joe is quite right. This is a struggle that is essential, because even if you're a liberal, this country needs a strong and healthy conservative party. And right now, we don't have that in the Republican Party. I really do think, as a lifelong Republican, that it is the main political menace to the country, and Republicans have to recognize it and do something about it.
And Matt, in your new piece entitled "Trump's GOP is a Party of Snowflakes and Beta Males," you write in part, quote, "Today's GOP is full of patient careerists who amazingly are too tolerant. They believe that swallowing their pride and sublimating their anger, opinions, and even familial loyalties is the way to win the long game. The big question is, why do they tolerate Trump? Why doesn't their primal desire for pride and honor and dignity ever kick in? The only John Wayne they have left is Donald Trump. He's the alpha male, and the betas all cower before him. What we're left with is a GOP full of neutered opportunists, snowflakes paying their dues, biting their tongues, and hoping to retire with a gold watch."
Matt, I don't understand it. I've never understood it. I've looked over the past 5 years. We've had conversations. I've had conversations with leaders. People have had Paul Ryan. You know, I'm not saying to follow up with all the things that you said, but I remember sitting down with Paul and said, "Paul, here's the thing you got to understand about Donald. Right? He never respects anybody that doesn't push back. You can't just sit there and take it constantly from him. You can't take the insults. You have to push."
Were you recently injured in a car accident in Florida? Look at this check for $145,000.
Back hard. None of them ever got it. They let him run over them. And, you know, I called these group of people back when I was in Congress fat white pink boys. They would just sit there in their suspenders and they would do whatever they were told to do, and they got run over every day. But it seems like Liz Cheney's one of the only people that's learned how to push back, and I think it's going to make a difference for her in the long run.
I did too. I think Winston Churchill had some line about how, you know, countries that go down without a fight don't tend to rise up again, but countries who go down fighting, although they go down, they have a future. I think there's some truth to that, at least at the individual level. I'm not saying you should fly off the handle. That's how Sonny Corleone got killed in that toll booth, right? We need to be smart. We all have to sometimes swallow our pride. But I think, you know, when you look at this story of what happened to the Republican Party, as Pete was saying, there's a lot to it. But one of the pieces is cowardice. It's that at some point Republican elites, Republican leaders decided to sublimate their opinions, their anger, and their pride, and basically bow to Donald Trump. And I think there have been multiple times where there have been off-ramps where Republicans could have stood up, Republican leaders could have stood up and could have fought him. And every time they have shown to really be wimps. And so I think the interesting thing to me, Joe, is, you know, I'm from a rural area, and the kind of country cowboy conservatism I grew up with, people, if you insulted someone's family, if you insulted their family, if you insulted their dignity and their honor, they'd come out fighting. But these Republicans today, they don't have that same mentality.
No, they really don't. I must say, I don't get it. I don't get so much on so many fronts, but the wimp factor, I really don't get. That they allow themselves to be insulted and they don't push back. They don't fight back. They let themselves get run over by this guy, and they don't make him pay too. You've got to make somebody pay politically if they come after you. It's that simple. And none of them do. None of them have, and that's why he continues to run over them. You know, Pete Wehner, the thing that I actually loved about the Republican Party back when I was a member, and you and I are a perfect example of this. We've been good friends. We've worked together on projects, but we also fought pretty tough when you were in the Bush White House. I was, you know, sort of a deficit hawk, some would say, that worked with me, a deficit freak. But we would have really tough back and forths, and they were always thoughtful. Usually they were respectful. Sometimes I may have been a little too harsh on my side of it. But we got through it, and we always came together at the end saying, okay, this is how we're going to make a better party. This is how we're going to win the next election. There is just no, I mean, for the party that, you know, had Jack Kemp and other people in the early 1980s, and yes, Newt in 1994, who had thousands of ideas, and as Bob Dole said, even one or two of them were pretty good. We were the party of ideas. That's, for now at least, over. How disheartening is that for you, a guy, an ideas guy?
Yeah, that's one of the things I really lament, Joe. You're exactly right. You know, I think you and I are, in a sense, both are children of the Reagan Revolution. If you go back to the 1980s, there was a real confidence in the intellectual power of conservatism. Antonin Scalia, James Q. Wilson, the social scientists, welfare reform, Alan Bloom proposing the American minds. There's a real kind of pride in the thought that went into conservatism. That began to wane. I think it began in the 90s. Gingrich is actually an interesting example because he combines two elements. One was he was obviously creative intellectually, though sometimes he really went off the rails. I think it was the temperamental danger that Newt Gingrich embodied. I was a little, I guess, concerned about him at the time, not nearly as much as I should have been. And then you got to the 2000s, you got Sarah Palin, who was, I think, a very significant figure in that. And the Republican Party jettisoned being the party of ideas, so now it's Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head and culture wars. And there is just no engagement with ideas or no interest in policy and governing. So this is all of these things are tangled together in the Republican Party. It has to be pulled apart. It is not a conservative party right now. It's a populist party. It's an ethnic nationalist party. Sometimes it's incidentally conservative. But in many ways, it's antithetical to conservatism, including one of the core tenets of conservatism, which is the dangers of mob mentality and the passions of the people. And right now, it is inflamed in dangerous passions. It is a violent party, as we saw on January 6th, and it is going to get more violent unless people stand up to it.
Hey, Matt, it's Jonathan Lemire. A few minutes ago, we were talking about the Washington Post reporting about the lack of traffic to Donald Trump's new website. In fact, it draws fewer visitors than the pet adoption site Pet Finder and the recipe site Delish. And we all can agree on the need for good chicken cacciatore and a beagle, perhaps. But it shows you how hard right now Donald Trump is having, the difficult time he has, getting his new message out there. But yet, he still has the conservative media and so much of the Republican Party in his thrall. You also wrote about Kevin McCarthy and how he in particular has, despite one brief break from the former president after January 6th, has sidled up to him again. Give us your analysis here. Is there any sense at all that McCarthy is going to do anything other than just march in lockstep with Trump as he tries to become the majority of the House Speaker in 2022?
I don't think so, and this goes back to the other column I wrote at the Daily Beast. I think that Kevin McCarthy is one of those Republicans who could have stood up, and certainly, I mean, if there was ever an opportunity, that off-ramp would have been after January 6th. He did criticize Trump briefly, and then they evolved pretty quickly into, it's almost like, let's count to 10 and go back to our abuser, is basically what they do. I think that Kevin McCarthy is not a leader. He's a follower. And I actually think this is look, Republicans, by all counts, really ought to win the midterm, right? They should take back the House just for historical reasons. The wind is at their back, but they're lacking a few things, and one of them is really a message. Kevin McCarthy can't lead his caucus. They can't talk about Joe Biden. They can't talk about the looming inflation, the rising crime rate, you name it. All the things that you could talk about if you had a coherent conservative message. Really, instead, Kevin McCarthy is at the mercy of the whims of Donald Trump. I mean, luckily, Donald Trump's online game ain't what it used to be. But still in all, Kevin McCarthy doesn't have any control over his caucus, over what the message is going to be. And so, look, I think the Republicans probably still get lucky just because of all these external factors. But if you're counting on Kevin McCarthy to help put you over the top and for him to become speaker, think again.
Matt Lewis and Pete Weiner, thank you both very much. We appreciate your being on. Kevin McCarthy can't even talk about the assault on the Capitol with his colleagues, many of them getting traumatized and people getting hurt. He can't even talk about that.
I mean, the funny thing is, he actually did talk about it to them, and he talked about it to anybody who would listen on January the 6th.
Right, on that day.
And he was,
he was very scared,
He was harshly critical of Donald Trump, which was appropriate.
That's right.
And now he's lost his voice. It's so sad.
Joining us now, we have Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Susan Page, and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Good to have you both on board this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us, Susan. Thank you for being with us. We have a couple things going on right now. One, of course, we're coming up, it's 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. Also this past weekend, and I've seen you with the head of ADL repeatedly over the past several years. Rise of anti-Semitic attacks from New York City to Los Angeles, deeply, deeply disturbing, and they just continue.
Well, yes, I'm in Minneapolis where yesterday we had a rally with the George Floyd Family Foundation, Bridget Floyd and other members of the family. And the family is going to Washington to meet with the president tomorrow on the actual anniversary, while many of us around the country are going to have a 9-minute, 29-second standing at noon at the House of Justice of the National Action Network and around the country to try and push for the George Floyd Policing Act, Justice and Policing Act. And we hope the president will meet with civil rights leaders to play a part in making sure that happens. But at the same time, you can't fight against racism or bigotry just in your silo. And the attacks that we're seeing around the country that are based on anti-Semitic attacks must be just as deplored and denounced as we do when we see anti-black attacks. We have concerns when we see what goes on in the Middle East. We've made our positions clear about a two-state solution. But for people based on the fact that people are Jewish, just go on their own and commit crimes that are based on that must be denounced unequivocally. And I think when I look back at when I was a younger activist and I was brought to the Jewish Theological Seminary to meet with Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who marched with Martin Luther King. That whole dream of bringing black and Jews together, again, is something people have worked on for decades, even when we disagreed about some of the lines on the West Bank and whatever the policies may be. But to stand by and watch people just being attacked in Times Square and other places because they're Jewish, we must raise our voices against that, as we also ask Jews and Arabs just raise their voices with us on George Floyd and other cases. You can't have it any other way. You must fight against any wrong, or you don't have the moral authority to fight against when you're wrong.
And Susan Page, how does that play into those challenges, play into President Biden's next 100 days? You're writing about that and talking about how the next 100 days are going to be a lot tougher. It's where the rubber meets the road, where reality can often bite.
Yes, President Biden had, I think, a pretty sure-footed first 100 days. He was able to get through that big COVID package. We've seen the happy results with the decline in COVID deaths and COVID hospitalizations. That's very encouraging. But now, he had hoped to sign that George Floyd Criminal Justice Act tomorrow on the 1-year anniversary. of George Floyd's murder. That's not going to happen. So possible that criminal justice bill will be able to get through the Senate, but not on time. Infrastructure stalled. And you saw him pulled into the conflict in the Middle East because it is not an issue that an American president can avoid, but it's probably also not one that an American president can solve, not anytime soon. So these are some of the challenges. It's really quite precisely the lesson that his predecessors in the White House have learned, which is you don't always get to pick your priorities, but your ability to avoid being overwhelmed by things that happen around you is really a test of whether you'll be successful or not.
So, Susan, what is the strategy right now as far as coming to a deal with Republicans or deciding to cut them loose? Are they still working closely with Joe Manchin to show Joe and to show Senator Sinema that they're doing absolutely everything they can to work in good faith to get a bipartisan bill with Republicans before just passing it on their own?
Yeah, those two Democratic senators are the silent partners in these bipartisan talks between Republicans and the White House, because if those talks don't result in a bipartisan deal, and it is increasingly unlikely that they will, those are the Manchin and Sinema are the two that the White House needs to convince to stand with them if they move to reconciliation. I think that is increasingly the likelihood that we're going to see. I think it is increasingly likely that we'll see Democrats turn to a party line vote, and they have to make sure with those very narrow majorities, they have to make sure they can hold every Democrat if that's the route they're going to take.
So, Reverend Sharpton, a year later, the New York Times yesterday had a lot of sort of post-mortems and look-backs over the past year. Where are we a year later after George Floyd?
Well, we are still needing to see federal law. We are the same place we were a year ago when it comes to federal law. We are making some steps forward on the other levels. We saw the conviction of former Officer Derek Chauvin here in Minneapolis, something we've never seen before. It was the first time in the history of this state of Minnesota that a white policeman was convicted for killing a black. But then right after the conviction, there was a black young man killed 10 miles from here in Bedford Center, Minnesota. So we see steps forward, but we see that we must do a lot more. And that is federal legislation. Until we can legislate it from a federal level, we'll keep going from incident to incident. This is winning around with the Chauvin verdict, but we haven't won the fight.
All right, Reverend Nell, thank you. The USA Today's Susan Page, thank you very much for being on this morning. Let's get now to Mayor Bill de Blasio, who is joining us now. He has a big announcement to make exclusively with us about New York City public schools. Mr. Mayor, thank you. What's the news?
Mika, it's good news. New York City Public Schools, 1 million kids will be back in their classroom in September. All in person, no remote.
Wow.
That's the news. I think parents, kids, everyone's been waiting for it to know we're going to be back strong, ready, safe. COVID is plummeting in this city. I'm happy to say we're almost at 8 million vaccination doses since day one. And it's just amazing to see the forward motion right now, the recovery that's happening in New York City. But you can't have a full recovery without full strength schools, everyone back sitting in those classrooms, kids learning again. So that's what we're going to have in September.
That's going to make a big difference for a lot of struggling parents too. What's the model for other cities to make this possible? What has it taken to make it possible to get kids back into classrooms?
Mika, we set a gold standard really from the very beginning, taking the health and safety measures from around the world that we saw worked in schools. Kids had masks on in all our schools the whole time, lots of cleaning, lots of ventilation. We layered all these approaches, and it worked really powerfully. We've had much, much lower levels of COVID in our schools for months and months, much safer than any other place in the city. And the city's been getting better now for quite a while, with the lowest COVID positivity in 7 months right now in New York City.
So what really worked was to layer on those health and safety measures. We're going to be doing that again, a version of that, a different version for different times, but we're going to do that again in September. And look, we know, especially now, more and more kids and staff will get vaccinated. We've made vaccination available everywhere. It's time. It's really time to go full strength now.
So this is great news for so many New York City parents. None more than Jonathan Lemire, who can go back to watching soap operas in the afternoon and start his online betting habits.
He needs them, guys.
It's really, he needs it for his reporting. It's like his Hemingway moment. It's the soap operas. You get to watch your stories again, Jonathan, next year. Isn't this great news for you?
Days of Our Lives has been a staple for me for a long time, Joe. I'm glad I'll be able to re-engage with this now, thanks to this news. It was great news to be sure. But I wanted to ask you, currently, with now in September, there will be no remote option. Right now, though, fully 60% of city students are doing it remote. How do you overcome the hesitancy of their parents to convince them to send their children back to school? And how do you physically do it if there are still social distancing requirements that could lead to crowded classrooms? Hesitancy, social distancing. How do you handle those two things?
Jonathan, a lot of information, a lot of communication is the answer to the first. We're going to welcome parents to come into the schools starting in June, see how much has been done to keep them safe, get reacclimated. We're going to do that throughout the summer, coming into September. Anyone has a question, concern, come into your child's school, see what's going on, get the answers. In terms of the overall approach, look, we have proven we can beat back COVID all over this country, and school opens 4 months from now. So I absolutely believe COVID will continue to go down, vaccinations will go up, recovery will be strong. I think the CDC will be changing those rules quite a bit between now and September. But right now in New York City public schools, we could have every child 3 feet apart. We could make that work if we had to, but I actually fundamentally believe by August, the CDC will relax those rules further to recognize the progress that we've made in this country.
Fantastic. Tell me, Mr. Mayor, there's a race going on in New York City. Just curious what your thoughts are about the participants. Is there anybody that you support, or is anybody who concerns you?
Joe, I'm only going to say this. We have a recovery going on right now in New York City, and it has to be a recovery for all of us. It really has to be inclusive. It has to be a recovery that does not just replace the previous status quo before the pandemic, but takes us somewhere better. On December 31st, I'm handing the baton to someone. So they have to be ready to deepen that recovery and just take it to full strength all along. I'm not going to comment yet on this race, but I'll say this much. It's very close. Voters have not yet paid a lot of attention. I think you're going to see in the last week or two before June 22nd, they'll finally consolidate. But this is not like most elections. We also have ranked choice voting for the first time in New York City. So I think it's going to be a much tighter election than most we're used to.
Are you concerned about the candidacy of Andrew Yang?
Look, Joe, I'm not going to talk about any individual candidate. I only know Andrew Yang a little bit. I find him a very likable person. But here's what I say about all the candidates. This is a really tough moment. New York City is coming out of arguably the biggest crisis in our history, and we've got a lot of things we have to get right at this point. So the next mayor better be ready to hit the ground running. I think that's something the voters are going to weigh heavily. Unlike a non-crisis environment, I think this time voters will weigh experience, understanding of the city, a sense of how to actually get things done. I think that's going to weigh heavily in their minds.
All right, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. By the way, Morning Joe's Dr. Dave Campbell enjoyed spending time with you and your wife last week when he was up interviewing you. Thank you very much for that.
We love Dr. Dave.
Yes, we do.
He said Joe can have as many hamburgers in the morning as he wants, that it's actually a new diet trend. It's okay.
No, it's just so gross.
Exactly.
All right.
Maybe I'm stretching
Bill de Blasio.
The smell of
Thank
3 in the
you.
morning.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, could U.S. officials be... The administration is facing pressure to investigate a growing number of mysterious attacks on U.S. diplomats, spies, and military personnel. Intelligence officers are working to confirm if microwave radiation is being used as a weapon to affect the health of U.S. officials in what has become known as Havana syndrome. People believed to have been affected have reported headaches, dizziness, and in some cases a loud noise before the sudden onset of symptoms. Joining us now, staff writer at The New Yorker, Adam Entis. His latest report is entitled Stealth Mode, How the Havana Syndrome Spread to the White House. And he writes in part this: top officials in both the Trump and Biden administrations privately suspect that Russia is responsible for the Havana Syndrome. Their working hypothesis is that agents of the GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Service, have been aiming microwave radiation devices at U.S. officials to collect intelligence from their computers and cell phones, and that these devices can cause serious harm to the people they target. Yet during the past 4 years, U.S. intelligence agencies have been unable to find any evidence to back up this theory, let alone sufficient proof to publicly accuse Russia. Intelligence is an imperfect science, a U.S. intelligence official told me. It's what you know, and it can change in the blink of an eye. There is still disagreement about how to refer to the incidents. Privately, officials characterize them as attacks. Publicly, they refer to them as anomalous health incidents. And Adam, you are detailing for the first time what happened to 3 White House staffers, including a senior National Security Council official who became ill on the grounds of the heavily fortified White House.
The thrill of the chase, researching, scrolling through reviews, or wandering aisles. With thousands of amazing products at Best Buy, you could chase that thrill for a long time. Or, with our help, skip to the really fun part, bringing it home ASAP. Best Buy, let's talk about what's possible.
House itself, tell us about that.
So this member of the NSC staff was finishing his day at work, and he walked from the old executive office building and made his way down to West Executive Avenue, which is right across from the West Wing. And it was on those steps as he's getting to, right across from the Oval Office when he began to have a very intense headache and felt a ringing in his ears. And at this point, he starts to lose control of his motor skills, particularly in his limbs and his fingers. He has about a 600-yard walk to his car, and on his way there, he falls because he cannot control his legs. He thinks he's going to die at this point. He makes his way to a nearby street, and he manages to get his Lyft app open on his phone and makes his way to the hospital.
It's remarkable, Adam, and we've been hearing about these stories since 2016, I guess, through the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and the Biden administration. And it seems that every story is met with, or at least in the past has been met with a bit of skepticism by others in the agencies. Is that skepticism starting to lift? Are people starting to realize that there is something more significant to this?
Frankly, this is an incredible mystery in that, the CIA, the NSA, the National Security Agency, basically since the first episode in December of 2016, have not been able to find any intelligence. And after a period of time like this that goes by, where there isn't the intelligence, naturally within any intelligence agency, there starts to be the question, is this a misunderstanding? Is this a collection of other ailments that could explain what's happening? Not much has changed on the intelligence side since that first incident in December 2016. The intelligence community still doesn't have anything. There was an assessment that was done by the FBI's behavioral analysis unit, where they concluded that this was psychogenic illness in those initial incidents in Havana. They reached this conclusion, I should add, without actually interviewing any of the victims. So this skepticism is sort of seeped into the bureaucracy. And it's been really kind of these cases where top policymakers actually know the victims. So in the case of these two White House victims, this NSC victim, top policymakers knew them, trusted them, and because of that, they sort of put aside the skepticism that they were hearing from the CIA, the skepticism they were hearing from the FBI, and sort of demanded kind of a reopening of this cold case. And really what happens is they basically ask all the agencies, tell us your cases. And it just kind of opened a floodgate when all these additional reports started pouring in. Obviously we don't know the extent to which all of them are the same thing. It's very much a moving target at this stage.
You do have one incident, though, where you talk about an officer pulling his car into a busy intersection in Russia. Suddenly he felt as though his head was going to explode, which sounds very consistent. A CIA officer in the same city reported a very similar episode. One of the reasons we asked you on today is because I've got a good friend, lifelong friend who's in the agency, who has a friend who went to an official trip to Moscow, who had to retire because he got attacked as well. But you say here in this one incident, later geolocation data indicated that vehicles affiliated with Russia's military intelligence service had been in the vicinity of both people at the time of their separate incidences. Is that perhaps one of the only pieces of evidence that they have that Russia may be directly connected with this?
Yeah, so there are approximately more than 130 instances around the world, right? Of the 130, in about a handful of those cases, including the two that you just mentioned, they identified GRU vehicles in the vicinity of the Americans that got sick at the moment that they got sick. This is obviously something that the CIA analysts have to look at closely, and they are looking at it closely. But this data is, shouldn't be viewed as necessarily like a smoking gun, because in a lot of these countries where this is happening, every time a senior American spy or a senior American military officer leaves the embassy, or frankly leaves his home or his or her home, there is a GRU vehicle following him or her, around the city. So why does it only happen in this handful of cases? So I think you mentioned, which is right. There's a lot of pressure right now on the Biden administration, and there was pressure at the end of the Trump administration to basically say, this is Russia, line up the perpetrator and shoot them, right? And the reality is that the intelligence is just not there. They have this circumstantial case, and they have a gut feeling based on a history of knowing what the Russians are willing to do in other cases, but really there really isn't the intelligence at this point to point to the Russians or to retaliate in any way. That could change, as we say, very quickly.
But Adam, there is also great skepticism inside many of the intelligence agencies that Russia would be so brazen, and let me just say so stupid, to launch an attack in the United States. And again, to think that Russia would be asinine enough to attack a White House staffer as they're walking from the old executive office building to the White House, my God, the floodgates. I mean, it was heinous enough and shocking enough and caused enough damage to Russia when we found out they were poisoning people in Great Britain. But to do it on White House grounds, that would open so many floodgates. Would that be worth it for any intel they gained?
Yeah, no, I share your view that it and frankly, the victim in that case, the NSC official, completely agrees with you, and frankly, after it happened to him, he was convinced that it must be something else. There must be some other explanation for what happened. It was when he heard details from one of his colleagues about some of the other more extreme cases that he thought, well, maybe this is what happened to me, and he reported it, which was then added to this running list of 130 plus possible cases. That particular individual had just gotten back from a trip overseas, and so he has, basically we just don't know really, is it possible something happened to him? There's a case that's cited in the article about a CIA officer, senior CIA officer, who goes in August 2017 down to Havana, gets to her hotel room that night. She feels the pressure. She hears the noise. She calls a colleague to come down the hallway to come check in her room. She goes back to sleep in the same room. She goes back to Langley a few days later, and a few days after that, suddenly she's beset by these symptoms. So it's, we don't really know what happens on that NSC official's trip overseas that might help explain what happens. Or frankly, the doctors may have been right when they said it was a migraine with aura. The doctors that he saw at the hospital after he became ill. So we just don't know.
Yeah.
Tonight, the new clash is putting the fragile ceasefire in the Middle East to the test. New fighting breaking out at a holy site after the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas went into effect. But also scenes of celebration, thousands in the streets. Our Richard Engel inside Gaza. Here in the U.S., the brawl in Times Square, the hate crime arrest for the beating of a Jewish man. Disturbing new body cam from that deadly arrest of Ronald Green. Green appearing to struggle to breathe on the ground, his hands cuffed behind his back, and with the newly revealed autopsy found. New COVID cases in the U.S. falling to the lowest level in nearly a year. Also the growing number of states banning mask mandates and rising concerns about mask guidelines for the office. Prince Harry opening up about his struggles with drugs and alcohol after the death of his mother, Princess Diana. Our journey across America to Los Angeles, the homeless crisis here, and my conversation with the mayor. Is the city doing enough? And the incredible bravery that earned a Korean War veteran the Medal of Honor.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, across America. Reporting tonight from Los Angeles.
Good evening, everyone. The iconic Santa Monica Beach, our backdrop this evening as we conclude our Across America journey in Los Angeles. The beauty belies a crisis here only exacerbated by the pandemic. I spoke to LA Mayor Garcetti about how the city is addressing homelessness, and we'll have some of that conversation ahead. But the Mideast is where we start again tonight in Israel and Gaza. Residents counting their losses and gingerly surveying the destruction as a shaky truce goes into a second night. The rockets that crisscross the skies and aerial bombardments now silent. Israel and Hamas claiming victory, but at what cost? Tonight we have reporting from both sides of the conflict. Here's Richard Engel.
Gaza today is bruised and battered. 8,000 homes damaged or destroyed. Hamas did not win this fight militarily, claiming victory in the ruins because it kept firing rockets until the very end. During the peak of the fighting, we found Nadine Abdelatif, just 10 years old, but with a powerful message.
They don't deserve to die.
Today, I met her. What has it been like for you and your little brother throughout all of this?
We don't care if they have weapons or anything else. They're scared of us, and we're not scared of them.
But in Israel today, the Prime Minister also claiming victory, warning Hamas of a new level of force if it fired first on Israel again. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin met Ron Ariely, whose house was hit by a Hamas rocket before the ceasefire.
Do you think the ceasefire is going to hold?
Who knows? Maybe a month, maybe two, maybe a half year, maybe a year. But at some point, it's usually...
And once again today, clashes at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was scenes like these that sparked the fighting 2 weeks ago.
This ceasefire is extremely fragile, and Hamas is linking its willingness to abide by it to what happens to Palestinians in Jerusalem. Lester?
Richard Engel tonight, thank you. And President Biden was asked about that ceasefire negotiated by Egypt. Our Jeff Bennett is at the White House. Jeff, what did the president say?
Lester, President Biden said tonight there is no shift in his commitment to Israel after many progressive Democrats have been pushing him to get tougher.
And I think that, you know, my party still supports Israel.
The president went on to say there won't be peace until the other players in the region acknowledge Israel's right to exist. Lester?
All right, Jeff Bennett at the White House. Thanks. New disturbing police video out tonight showing a black man in Louisiana struggling to stay alive as police restrained him, providing new details of the confrontation we first told you about 2 nights ago. Our Blaine Alexander tells us more.
Tonight, a graphic new look at police body camera video that shows the final moments of Robert Green's life. The video, obtained, edited, and released by the Associated Press, shows a handcuffed Green trying repeatedly to hold onto his side. At one point, an officer is seen forcing Green down with his shoe.
Is that consistent with law enforcement training?
No, it's not. So the goal is always to get the subject under control. Officers have a responsibility to do that. But they also have a responsibility to roll those persons over or get them up on their feet.
The incident happened in May 2019 after Green led Louisiana State Police on a high-speed chase. In the video, you see and hear officers repeatedly punch Green, tase him, and at one point drag him.
And I beat the ever-living out of him, choked him, and everything else trying to get him under control.
Tonight, Louisiana State Police announced the department will release all body camera video. Green's family calls it a cover-up, saying they were initially told he died in a car crash. This newly public autopsy report does not list a manner of death.
That is a common tactic for stonewalling by law enforcement officers if you don't provide the narrative.
The incident is now under federal investigation. Blaine Alexander, NBC News.
Let's turn to the pandemic now with the question, are we going too far too soon? While the numbers are trending in the right direction, there is concern and plenty of confusion. Miguel Almaguer explains.
With new COVID cases at their lowest level in nearly a year, and more than 60% of Americans at least partially vaccinated, today the CDC revealed these maps, capturing COVID hotspots across our nation 5 months ago, and what it now looks like today. But some doctors worry the unvaccinated may also go maskless when Americans head back to the office.
I think it's very safe for vaccinated Americans to go back into the office. My concern comes with the 40% of Americans still not vaccinated.
But more states are banning mask mandates for businesses and schools, as scenes like these emerge from Nashville, in a state where only 32% are fully inoculated. Tonight, our nation eager to move forward, but anxious for what lies ahead.
And Miguel joining us now. We've seen you many a time reporting from that mass vaccination site over at Dodger Stadium. What's the status there now?
Lester, cities like Los Angeles and all across the country are closing those mass vaccination sites. They're moving to mobile clinics. They feel like they can reach more people that way.
All right, Miguel Almaguer, good to see you. Thanks so much. In just 60 seconds, Prince Harry speaking out about his mental health struggle. Deeply personal revelations by Britain's Prince Harry tonight, and new controversy over a famous interview with Princess Diana. Keir Simmons is in London.
Tonight, pillars of British society rocked. Prince Harry again criticising the royal family, telling Oprah of his descent into drink and drugs.
I find myself drinking not because I was enjoying it, but because I was trying to mask something.
But it's another interview, decades ago, that's causing controversy, where Princess Diana famously said there were 3 people in her marriage. An inquiry says, to get the sit-down, BBC journalist Martin Bashir lied to Diana, even doctoring documents. Bashir apologising, but saying Diana would still have agreed to be interviewed. The BBC also apologising.
The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse.
Since his mother's death, Prince Harry says he's suffered with an uncaring family who failed to support his wife when she wanted to take her own life.
The thing that stopped her from seeing it through was how unfair it would be on me, be put in a position of losing another woman in my life.
2 interviews, decades apart, tonight shaking the British establishment. Keir Simmons, NBC News, London.
This week, we have been traveling the country examining the road ahead from the pandemic. And for Los Angeles, that road travels through a landscape dotted with homeless encampments. LA's Mayor Eric Garcetti under growing pressure to help get more homeless into housing. I spoke to him today about that challenge. Across the city, the tents stretch everywhere. From Hollywood to Venice Beach, scenes from what could be a disaster movie. Now, a seemingly permanent fixture on the streets of Los Angeles.
If you're not shocked by what you see, then I don't know what you would be shocked by.
When COVID first hit, the city stopped large-scale cleanups at most encampments to keep the virus from spreading. That's when residents say things changed.
People shooting up, urinating out in the open, vomiting.
Officials here last counted more than 66,000 experiencing homelessness in January 2020. But that was before the pandemic struck, and hundreds of thousands of Angelenos lost their jobs. Since then, our partners on NBC LA's investigative team have captured these images, showing a situation spiraling out of control. Trash spilling into traffic, tents taking over intersections, stretches of the iconic Venice boardwalk now resembling a refugee camp. It's a reality no one is comfortable with.
This is my home.
Chanel Grace has been homeless for 3 years.
This city has a lot of cleaning up to do. They're doing it so wrong. They're making it harder for us to want to even do any better for ourselves.
A few blocks away, restaurant owner Janet Zuccarini also feels betrayed.
It's a problem for people living under these conditions, and it's a problem for people living in this area, visiting in this area, and people that have small businesses.
Both the housed and unhoused say politicians have turned their backs on them.
We were able to get 100%.
We met Mayor Eric Garcetti at a transitional tiny home shelter the city just opened 3 months ago. These 39 homes, 64 square feet each, costing taxpayers $5.4 million. This parcel will cost $5 million.
Parcel was free, we owned it, but yeah, to build everything up, it was about $5 million, but think about it.
39 units.
Correct, but that's something that can be recycled year after year after year. Everybody can point to the cost of building things. I point to the cost of not building things.
Tapping into state and federal money, Garcetti has proposed nearly $1 billion to combat the crisis, the largest ever in the city's budget. The mayor wants to utilize funds from Proposition H, a bond program overwhelmingly approved by voters in 2016 to create up to 10,000 permanent housing units over a decade. But with only 700 completed, Garcetti's plan has come under fire. A 2020 audit criticized the program for long delays and rising costs, finding the average unit costs $558,000 to develop. Are you getting behind those goals?
No, we're not. We're actually exceeding the goals of what we set out to build. But that doesn't mean that homelessness necessarily goes down in America. It's like being in the boat and getting bigger and bigger, containers to bail the water out.
But critics say local leaders still aren't acting fast enough. Fed up, a federal judge ordered the city and county to provide housing for every unsheltered person on Skid Row by mid-October. Both have appealed.
Dealing with homelessness is not for the faint of heart. It's not a place to get credit, and it's not a place that there's easy solutions. If I had $1 for every time somebody said, I know how to solve homelessness, I'd be a millionaire.
Suzette Shaw says receiving permanent housing with supportive services was a game changer for her.
If you were to see a picture of me 5 to 6 years ago, you would not even know me.
Homeless on Skid Row for 4 years, Shaw says any plan must include long-term mental health treatment.
I remember my first doctor saying to me that, how long did it take you to get in this situation? Well, then it's going to take you at least that long or more to get out of it.
While change here may not come overnight, all can agree the urgency and desperation are mounting.
I just can't understand how a country would allow people to live like this.
As more tents go up every day. Not just an LA crisis, but a national crisis, and one we will continue to cover on this broadcast. It's known as America's Forgotten War, but today President Biden made sure an American hero of the Korean War will never be forgotten. Courtney Cubey has more.
Calling it a recognition 70 years overdue, today President Biden presented the Medal of Honor to retired Colonel Ralph Puckett. The 94-year-old insisting on standing on his own, but accepting a helping hand from his commander-in-chief. A far cry from that freezing November day in 1950, when Puckett led a ranger company on a daylight attack to seize Hill 205 near Unsan, Korea. His troops faced overwhelming fire by hundreds of Chinese. Puckett ran into the open 3 times to draw enemy fire, endangering his own life to expose enemy positions. Seriously wounded, his men low on ammunition, Puckett ordered them to retreat and to leave him in the foxhole. They refused, dragging him to safety. Merle Simpson was there.
I think he understood that if we all be killed it, we didn't go out there.
Today, with the South Korean president also looking on, Ralph Puckett NBC News, Washington.
Up next for us tonight, what's behind a new wave of anti-Semitic attacks. The NYPD has made a hate crime arrest in the beating of a Jewish man in Times Square, one of more than 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents across the country just this year. We get more from Stephanie Goss.
Last night in Times Square, police say a Jewish man was the victim of an alleged hate crime. This video appears to show the moment 29-year-old Joseph Morgan was attacked.
I was surrounded by like a whole mob, crowd of people. They proceeded to, obviously assault me, beat me, kick me, punch me, hit me with crutches.
One man is facing multiple charges, including assault as a hate crime. The NYPD says he was looking for as many as 6 others. Morgan says they yelled anti-Semitic slurs while he was being beaten.
You're a dirty Jew, we're going to kill you.
The assault took place as pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli protesters confronted each other. In the days following the start of the recent violence in the Middle East, the Anti-Defamation League found more than 17,000 tweets with variations of the phrase, Hitler was right. In a survey, 63% of American Jews have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism in the last 5 years, and more than half feel less safe. On Tuesday, restaurant goers in Los Angeles were pelted with glass bottles, attacked by people waving Palestinian flags and yelling slurs against Jews. The conflict thousands of miles away, triggering anti-Semitic violence on U.S. streets. Stephanie Goss, NBC News, New York.
And the U.S. has also seen an alarming rise in anti-Asian attacks we've been reporting about. Here in Los Angeles, there's an effort to teach people in the community to defend themselves. Kim Tobin from our station KNBC reports.
Tucked away off the streets of downtown Los Angeles, family traditions are being kept alive. While all restaurants have been struggling through the COVID crisis, Leo and Lydia Lee's Rice Box faced an added challenge.
You get phone calls all the time, saying like, oh, do you serve COVID? Or like, is Corona here? When people are trying to draw that connection, it must still be difficult.
It was hurtful. It definitely hurt. And we didn't know how to speak up.
At the height of the pandemic, their son Ari was born, and their hearts sank as they saw the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans, up a staggering 189% nationwide. One study showed nearly a third of Asian adults feared someone might threaten or physically attack them. In Los Angeles, reports of anti-Asian hate crimes are up 80%.
It's horrifying, but it's scary.
I have relatives holding on to that live around here, and I'm afraid just walking around is scary. That's not a normal world.
It's an issue that's had an impact across all Asian American communities. From Little Tokyo to Chinatown and everywhere in between, people tell us this is their home, and it's time to fight back.
The fear that we felt, we just wanted to find a way to turn it into something productive.
Alyssa San Agustin and Tina Koo began to worry about their own loved ones.
Are you feeling vulnerable for them? Just really, or feeling like fears me to pull my grandma because she walks by herself every day.
So they started Box for Change, holding self-defense classes at local parks and gyms, helping their elders learn to protect themselves.
It's not that we expect seniors to fight in a situation, but we definitely just want them to be more prepared. I guess also like kind of create a community around them too,
and give them the tools that they need to, be able to defend themselves or be able to feel like they have a voice. A message already resonating with the younger generation.
We belong here, we're here, we're born here. We should really own it and embrace it and take charge of our heritage and culture.
A culture they hope to preserve and protect as they fight back against hate.
And Kim joining us now. Did you notice generational differences in this?
Absolutely, Lester. People in my generation, we've done really what our parents and grandparents have done. Ways, but really younger people, we've seen them stepping out of this box, speaking up now, all in hopes that the future generations are not going to face these challenges.
Kim, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. We also want to let you know you can watch more about the next generation of Asian American activists in our nightly news film, Rising Together, on demand. We'll be right back. Finally, a comeback story made in Hollywood and inspiring America. It's been nearly 100 years since these hills above Los Angeles have been this quiet for this long.
This terrible pandemic made us rethink everything.
Famed maestro Gustavo Dudamel leads the Los Angeles Philharmonic, preparing for a big comeback at the Hollywood Bowl. After the iconic venue, which has welcomed everyone from the Beatles to Sammy Davis Jr. and beyond, canceled its entire summer season. First time since opening its doors in 1922. Now, the Symphony Under the Stars is bringing back the sound of music to celebrate the real stars of 2020, like ER nurse Angel Cow.
We've had such a rough year. It's just amazing to be here.
And critical care physician Gregory Grandio.
Just a huge sense of relief and happiness that we're in this position right now.
They're among the thousands of frontline workers invited to a series of free concerts.
We are here now. We can do this because of them.
What was it like to be back on that stage?
A miracle, a resurrection.
An orchestra, grateful to finally be back on the stage, leading a grateful city, saying a special thanks to those who serve. A very special place in this city. That's Nightly News for this Friday from LA. Be sure to catch all our Across America stories on our website, NBCNightlyNews.com. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, uphill battle. 35 House Republicans broke rank and sided with all House Democrats to pass a now controversial bill creating an independent probe of the January 6th riot. The latest on what the Senate will do and what former President Trump is saying about it. Under pressure amid growing calls from world leaders for a ceasefire in the Middle East, President Biden speaks out on a de-escalation in the crisis. We'll bring you the latest on this diplomatic test for the president and all the details from the ground. Clean Team, a rare look at how one pandemic must-have is made. Purell, you know it, you've probably relied on it, will take you inside their factory in Cleveland. And friends forever. More than 17 years after their final cup of coffee at Central Perk, the captivating cast of Friends finally returning to the small screen. The new trailer for the highly anticipated upcoming reunion. And Joe, we are going to need a reunion of our own because you're still in LA.
Yes, I'm in LA today, but I'm flying back to New York, and we'll see you in person, I hope, tomorrow.
Great. Well, we have your seat here. I was going to say keeping it warm, but no one's sitting in it, of course, so we can't wait to have you back tomorrow. Let's begin now on Capitol Hill. The House passed a bill yesterday that would form a bipartisan commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection.
That vote came on the same day the FBI released new video of the riot, and a warning: some of the images you're about to see are disturbing. The video highlights two new suspects. One is shown allegedly ripping off a Capitol police officer's gas mask, grabbing the officer's baton, then hitting him with it. The FBI says the other suspect can be seen punching officers with metal-studded gloves. More than 4 months after that attack, Congress is still debating how to investigate the insurrection. During yesterday's vote, 35 House Republicans did break with party leadership, voting with Democrats to pass the bill that would create an independent commission. Congressman Tim Ryan made an impassioned speech directed at lawmakers who voted no.
This is a slap in the face to every rank-and-file cop in the United States. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need two political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. So, Leanne, first tell us about that vote yesterday and the pressure that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy faces for opposing the bill.
Good morning, Joe. So it was a pretty stunning rebuke that 35 House Republicans still voted in support of this commission, despite leadership coming out against it and despite leadership really twisting arms to get people to oppose it. But still, the vote passed. Of course, it's going to move over to the Senate. But as far as McCarthy is concerned, he is betting that he's going to be on the right side of the former president, Donald Trump. Of course, this opposition came as the former president name-checked him, calling him on him to oppose this. But there's been some talk about the fact that if a commission was formed, that perhaps McCarthy himself would be subpoenaed because of his conversations with the former president. I asked McCarthy about that yesterday. Listen to what he said. What do you say to people who say that you oppose this because you fear about being subpoenaed?
Why would I be involved in any of that in any aspect? It doesn't involve. I have no concern about that, but that's somebody playing politics with it, not wanting to get to the core of what happened.
And so that's McCarthy's stance, but it was a very difficult vote, especially for those 35 Republicans who left the party. So.
Leanne, the big question now, can this pass in the Senate? It needs 10 Republicans, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told his caucus he is now against the commission. Why is he against it, and what does that mean for the odds of passing this?
One day after saying he was undecided, then a Trump statement came out again calling on McConnell to oppose it. Then the next morning, which was yesterday, he came out opposed. Listen to why he explains it.
After careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th. What is clear is that House Democrats have handled this proposal in partisan bad faith, going right back to the beginning.
As you laid out, the question is, will there be the support of 10 Republicans? Well, it looks like a lot of Senate Republicans are following the lead of their leader, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has put it on the calendar. It could be voted on as early as next week, Joe.
Let's see what happens. Leanne Caldwell, thanks so much.
Violence between Israelis and Palestinians is raging on for an 11th day, even after President Biden called for a significant de-escalation in fighting. Overnight, Israeli warplanes unleashed a wave of airstrikes on Gaza, reducing buildings and homes to rubble. Overall, 230 Palestinians have been killed, including 65 children. Militant groups have retaliated with another wave of rocket fire toward Israel. The death toll there stands at 12. NBC News special correspondent Martin Fletcher joins us from Tel Aviv, Israel, and NBC News senior political analyst John Allen is also with us. Good morning to both of you. And Martin, I will start with you there on the ground. So there were more airstrikes on Gaza this morning. Tell us the latest.
That's right, Savannah. After President Biden's call for a quick de-escalation, well, that didn't happen. This morning there were very strong Israeli air attacks on targets in Gaza, the same targets we've been hearing about: underground tunnels, the homes of Islamic Jihad and Hamas leaders, which the Israelis say are legitimate military targets because they say the leaders are storing weapons in their homes and ammunition, all kinds of explosives. They're using their homes to direct the battles in information headquarters. So they're calling the homes of the leaders legitimate targets, and they're bombing those. At the same time, Hamas is firing rockets, continuing to fire rockets into Gaza. So this morning there's been a lot of fire in both directions. No significant damage on the Israeli side, but the question of whether or not Israel will stop firing and whether Hamas will stop firing. This morning, Hamas officials were saying that they had agreed a mutual agreement for a ceasefire within the next day or two. So that's what we're expecting.
And
John, at least hoping for, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. John, let's bring you in here. Another phone call between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu happened. Did this conversation go any differently? And also just putting context here for us, how much influence does the president really have here?
Well, Savannah, I think what you've seen from the White House, and I spoke to a White House official yesterday who sort of described the evolution of their messaging. You know, it started with reticence about this all together, and then there was a Biden supports the ceasefire, and then yesterday moved to a place where he was essentially demanding a significant de-escalation on a pathway to a ceasefire. But what he hadn't done yet is actually demand a ceasefire. And I think what the White House has been trying to do is give Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as much room as possible to carry out his military mission. The White House official also said to me yesterday that the White House felt that the Israeli military mission had been finished. And we saw an IDF spokesman say initially yesterday that they basically wanted to show Hamas, what happened when they attacked Israel. And so the goal here for the Israelis was beyond just the military objectives, more about dissuading Palestinians. I think we will find out this week whether Joe Biden has any more protection than that.
And John, also, let's talk about Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's made some controversial comments here, but now she says the U.S. should not be selling weapons to Israel, and she's planning to block a recent $735 million arms deal. Talk us through how much pressure President Biden is under from his own party to take a tougher line on Israel.
I mean, it is a vocal group in the House that would like to see that arms sale block. It is a larger group than we would have seen at any time in the last, 50 years, basically. And at the same time, it is a small percentage of the Congress. So the pressure on Biden is really, whether it's really about the grassroots and whether he's willing to separate himself or keep distant from the pressure he's getting to treat this as more of a two-sided issue than it has been in Washington over the course of years. The arms sale will not be blocked in Congress. There's overwhelming support for arms sales to Israel. And at the same time, I think there are a lot of Americans that are concerned about not only the actual use of U.S.-made weaponry in Israel against Palestinians, but also the optics of that.
Yeah. And John, also, as the situation has evolved to be something different than we've seen in years past, we also saw that the U.S. failed to back this UN Security Council statement calling for a ceasefire. Are there concerns here about the administration sort of being in an isolated position when you look at the international stage?
I mean, if you look at the last several decades, it's not unusual for the United States to be Israel's it's Israel's most vocal and influential supporter of the UN, and at the same time be lonely in doing that. So I don't know that there's concern about it. Obviously, the United States generally likes to operate in positions where they have a coalition in support of what they're doing and in support of what their allies are doing. But the UN is not necessarily the best forum for the Israelis, and the United States is well aware of that and accustomed to it.
Hey, Martin, last quick question for you. Yesterday when you were with us, you reported on protests that were going on outside of the Gaza Strip. Anything new there?
Not today, but that's the main concern of Israel, is that the rioting on the West Bank should stop. They're saying that if there is a ceasefire, if and when there is a ceasefire in Gaza, then the army will immediately turn its attention to the West Bank to tamp down all protest. But that is the fear, though, that could continue. And also, of course, Israeli Arabs versus Israeli Jews in Israel. But on those two fronts, for the time being, certainly today and yesterday, it's pretty quiet, Savannah.
Martin and John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Former President Trump is lashing out after the New York Attorney General announced her office is pursuing a criminal investigation of the Trump Organization. In a statement posted to his website, Trump said in part, quote, "There is nothing more corrupt than an investigation that is in desperate search of a crime." The Attorney General's office is working with the Manhattan District Attorney and says the criminal probe is an expansion of a civil investigation that started in 2019. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now. So, Monica, first of all, what more are we learning about the investigation and how these offices, the AG and the DA, will be working together?
Well, Joe, we're learning now this is really sort of about information sharing, and there are two new lawyers who have been detailed to work together from the New York Attorney General's office and the Manhattan DA to now collaborate on this, what was once a civil probe into the Trump Organization that has now ventured into the criminal. That doesn't mean, though, that there's any kind of smoking gun necessarily or any potentially new evidence that has moved this to that, but it's the opening of a lane where there could be some potential criminality here. And that question is really the one that remains very much unanswered. And legal experts are the ones to say, we don't yet know the implications, but this is certainly not good news for the former president, who is blasting this and calling it, quote, corrupt in a more than 900-word statement. So we still don't know a lot about this, but the fact that they came out and publicly said they were going to join forces and see what more they could uncover indicates there are potential new avenues here for investigation. Again, with the word criminal being the one that raises the most eyebrows, that we don't yet know what has pushed this forward, Joe.
And Monica, in that statement, the former president seemed to reference his longtime, now former attorney Michael Cohen, referring to him as a, quote, lying, discredited lowlife. We're hearing from Cohen. What's he saying about this investigation now?
And their relationship really has obviously soured over the last couple of years after he was one of the former president's closest confidants. But now Michael Cohen, in an interview on MSNBC last night, had some predictions for what he thinks will happen next. Take a listen.
I think Donald Trump is going to flip on all of them. What do you think about that, including his children? I really believe that Donald Trump is going to turn around. You always get shocked when I say things, Joy. I really believe that Donald Trump cares for only himself, and he realizes that his goose is cooked.
And of course, Michael Cohen did plead guilty to not telling the truth and has served time for that. So that's important to remember as well in all of this. But it's unclear where this goes. Of course, it's the former president's sons, and namely Eric Trump, who had been put in charge of the Trump Organization. And for his part, Eric Trump hasn't offered any detailed comment. The only thing we've really seen from allies of the Trump orbit is they are now trying to go after the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, who has made some comments in the past that were quite critical of Donald Trump while he was in office, guys.
Monica, the Trump Organization has been under civil investigation for 2 years. What could this criminal probe mean for the company now?
That's the million-dollar question, and this is really, we should remind people, it covers a huge range. This is not just about some of the certain properties and allegations of insurance fraud or tax fraud. There's a whole litany of other things that are being considered. So as the Trump Organization goes forward and tries to navigate, of course, we know the former president essentially lives at his own properties that are connected to the Trump Organization. There's plenty of implications there as well, but we simply just don't know how far-reaching this is. And again, again, we have to remind people there are a lot of parallel investigations here, and that's why the former president has so much exposure. In addition to this probe, of course, there are certain lawsuits related to his involvement in the January 6th insurrection and also in Georgia, of course, after he lost the November election.